apparently was released on an album. But the cool thing about this on YouTube is there's no film of the concert. So they took the bootlegs from the fans, which were silent, and put it with the master recording. And it's the end of Elvis's tour in 1974 or something like that, and he's in his hometown. If you know anything about most artists, they're only particular when they're playing to the hometown. You know, they want the sound right, they want everything right, they really go all out. Most people do. And here we go, right in the middle of the ring. Anyway, it's cool. I mean, Elvis is hitting on all cylinders. I won't give away the whole set list, but it does come on with the 2001 Space Odyssey. You know? But anyway, back to the pants. He's wearing the White Eagle suit when he comes out there, and you know it. I didn't zip them up yet on purpose, you know, because you want it. Wow. Elvis thing right there. Well, I can do better, but I don't want to slip off his superior garment.
Marble can be slippery.
Is it time yet? I was in Memphis one time. We parked in the parking garage, and we were coming down the pavement, the black asphalt, and my friends were in front of me, and there was these pretty girls in this car to my right. So for whatever reason, which is unexplainable at this point in this mindset that I'm in, I decided that it was time for Karate Elvis. All right? You know when Elvis used to come out with like that? I always liked that move, you know, he had. And so I broke out Karate Elvis, which is never a good sign. But I'm doing these moves for this car full of girls over here. And there's 4 girls and only one of them are watching. And I went up I don't know what you call it, but I went up on that back foot for that high kick, you know, like Elvis used to do. And man, I did the one of a lifetime. Man, I got that leg up, I kicked that foot up, and my back foot just came out. You ever had time slow down? Like we're slow motion, frame by frame? Well, that was me. And as I was flying through the air, I was thinking, boy, this is gonna suck. And I came back down and landed on that asphalt. Bam! Hit my right hip, you know. Of course, you know, 4 girls in there. I sprang back up. But the funniest part, going back to the original story, is 3 of them weren't looking. And the girl that was driving, when I stood back up, her mouth was open. And she, in slow motion, she was trying to tell her friends what she had just witnessed. This dude actually busted on black asphalt trying to do, I don't know if she knew it was Karate Elvis, but, you know, right there. Never did that again. Just want y'all to know. Why don't we do this? I was wondering how many people we get, so I think we can all fit. Why don't we don't need to see this way initially. Why don't we make our way up below the dome, and we'll stand there for a few minutes and set up the brigade, and then I'll face you about, and we'll take up the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg.
The Civil War was fought outside.
The Civil War was fought outside. You know, it's not bad though. Let me go over here and let me just get him one way and I'll project. Even if you can't see me, you can hear me. Look at you running out right me. You got on the front row.
Sorry, excuse me.
America. I love this cheese sticks too. It's the best.
I brought extra.
Did you?
Yeah, I'll share them.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it, 5 fishes? Something like that.
You gonna have to go around?
Yeah. All right. Does everybody know what we're doing today? All right. So let me formally get the program going right here. I guess you hadn't figured out who gets saved if the house is on fire, but I guess she'll figure it out eventually. In case you haven't in case you don't remember, or maybe you don't care. We're going to start out with the big picture, and then we're going to go down to the small picture. All right, so today we're following, small picture, we're following Willard's New York Brigade. I will go ahead and tell you, I'm sure I've got ancestors from all 4 regiments. I wasn't going to do that much on the 39th. I'll set all that up and we'll see what it's raining, but we'll see. I'll at least go point it out to you and so forth. What we were going to do, I was going to focus my attention on the other 3 regiments, the 125th, the 126th, and the 111th. Now it is my intention, and probably somebody has already been out there, it is my intention to follow that trail down to the Willard Monument, which is down in the swell down there. Now a lot of y'all are wearing shorts, so you know it is what it is. I mean, it is a pasture. So, but I think a lot of you probably haven't seen that marker. So I want you to see that. It's one of the few places we have where, you know, the event is actually marked. You know, you can count those on 2 hands, bro, one hand. So anyway, we're going to go big picture and then down to small picture. So let's set up the brigade first. Who are the units? So these folks that we're following today are New Yorkers. And I won't try to do the accent, to say the least. For those of you that are on this end over here facing me to my stage right or left, Willard's Brigade is going to begin up past the Bryan Farm. Some of you can probably see that white farmhouse up at the top of the ridge. And Willard's Brigade, and today their regimental markers are on the other side of the Bryan House on the Cemetery Ridge. That's one of the things that caught Willard's Brigade when they put up the monument, because the GBMA, Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association, and then rolling into the War Department, stipulated, and this didn't happen 100%, but they wanted it to happen this way, that the original markers for the regiments had to go on the original battle line. What they're doing there is trying to put order out of confusion. All right, and they're also keeping Confederate monuments out of the Union lines. I mean, that's also good for that too, you know. So they're keeping the peace among each other and among the former foes. So what I'm telling you is, when I talk about Willard, they're actually starting up here but fighting down here. Now Carlton does the whole walk. He'll walk you whole, if you come back for the anniversary, you're going down the whole route. I'm not quite that energetic anymore, especially when it's raining. But anyway, they're starting over here and the Union is facing back behind you, or facing the way that I'm facing. Okay, so the unit consists, as I said, of four units. The brigade, once again, corps, division, brigade, regiment. Regiment, brigade, division, corps. You can see it on this monument, the Pennsylvania monument, right here. All over the place, most of them being regiments. The 4 regiments, 39th New York, 269 men. I'll get back to them in a minute. 111th New York, 390 men. 125th New York, 392 men. And the 126th New York, 455 men. This is approximately 1,508 men coming out on the line. This is I would say, by a couple of hundred, an above average size brigade or regiments. You know, I would say, I don't know, probably somebody knows, but I'd say the average size regiment here is about 300. So they're slightly bigger. Most of them are in number wise. And also the first thing that grabs me is that the high numbers of Willard's Brigade. Whenever I see something in the Civil War, and I'm talking about Union right now, well, you could say Confederate, but Confederate numbers don't go as high. They have less men, and the Confederates put, unlike the Union, put new recruits in old units. The Union creates entire new units. That's why the Irish Brigade, for example, can't reform. They can't reconstitute because they can't get new members. They're forming, you know, other units. So anyway, when I see a number 111, 125, 126, that automatically tells me that the unit was raised later in the war. So it's going to be, in New York's case, it's going to be mostly 1862, right through here. If you look at the Confederate, the higher the number, the later in the war. All right, when people come to me, the visitors I mean, and they bring me their ancestors' paperwork, and they're in like the 214th Pennsylvania, I'm like, dude, these people were probably like fishing in Harrisburg, you know what I mean? By the time they got to 200, you're getting the like late war period. Isn't that funny?
I think so.
No. But true, you know, they're usually 9-month enlistees, you get up that long. Anyway, the other 3 regiments, sometimes I impress myself. I did this program in 2010. That's when this thing was originally written. Now, I went back and added a couple more pages because I wanted to do something different for y'all today, or put in some different information. But I was thinking as I did this program, if you go back and look, 2010, for one thing, I had hair when I did this program. Oh, all the bald guys like, oh no, you got a lot of hair to me. And, you know, the situation was completely different if you go back and see that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Ain't no chocolate milk no more. All right. So the 3 regiments, 111, 125, 126, specifically enlisted in July of 62, with Lincoln's call for an additional 300,000 volunteers. And they signed up for 3-year enlistments. These 3 units, 125, 126, 111, all arrived at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia in September of 1862. So keep this in mind. They enlist in July, and by September they're on at an active military post. Now you Gettysburg, I mean you Civil War buffs know where I'm going with this. It's September of 1862, and they're in Harper's Ferry.
Oops.
Tell them I said hello. Now, the 39th New York were at Harper's Ferry. That last regiment were here brigaded with the other 3 units. So the 39th joins the other 3 regiments. The 39th had the only real combat experience in the brigade. They were at 1st Manassas, they were at Cross Keys, in the Shenandoah Valley, and near Middletown in the Shenandoah Valley also. The Empire Staters enlisted in April of 1861 and was the first regiment from New York to re-enlist for 3 years. So they really thought highly of that. The regiment was known for the diverse nationalities, originally having 3 companies of Germans, 3 companies of Hungarians, if you can imagine, and 1 company each of Italians. Can you say that? Italians. Okay. There's your Southern lesson for today. Let's practice it together. Italians. Okay. So they have 1 company of Italians, 1 company of Swiss who brought their own cheese, right there, full of holes, which the Southerners did not understand. French and Spanish Portuguese, which I suppose means Spain. The 39th was known as the Garibaldi Guards. And they actually took 3 battle flags into, well, I don't know if they had them by now, but when they marched off in 1861, they marched off with the U.S. flag, the Empire State flag, and a flag from the European, some war in the green flag from the war in Europe. Yeah, they brought from this guy. They were organized by, and somebody gonna have to help me, Frederick G. D'Utassi, D hyphen, or what do you call it, colon, Utassy. Who wants a shot at it? Utassi. D-Utassi. In New York, he liked to be called the Count. And from now on, he's known as the Count,
It's easier to
not
say.
D.U. Tassie. Apparently, the old boy got a court-martial for incompetency and was removed in 1863. Y'all can go back, or if you're interested, I have the charges, and has nothing to do with Gettysburg, but basically he was exonerated on most charges, and they were like reselling army horses, putting in orders for, this is kind of smart actually if he's guilty of it. He put in, he drew rations for more men than he had. You know, stuff like that was what was occurring out there. And I think there may have been something funky with the payroll that he was accused of. But most of the stuff he was acquitted of. Now, they got him on some technical stuff. But the Army wanted him. The one thing about D.U. Tassie is that he is apparently a very supremely self-confident man. You know, if you want to be called the Count, I figure you possess something of that. But the Army, you know, the regulars, the Americans, they're out to get him. He had a target on his back to a certain extent, and his personal actions didn't help him. By the time of Gettysburg, the regiment was consolidated to 4 companies. That's down from 10 companies. Probably due because they had to cashier a lot of the captains for malfeasance. So they just backed it down and threw, probably, if I had to guess, I didn't look this part up, but I guarantee you those 4 companies were probably organized by nationality. You know, you just want, you want to keep the peace. We don't think like that nowadays, but you know, it would be smart. You know, I wouldn't put the Germans and the French in the same company. Don't tell them what's going to happen. Yeah. Well, you know I can't make that joke. It was funny. The 125th, 126th, and 111th had only been in the service for 3 weeks when Lee's invasion of Maryland commenced. 39th's the only one that's got combat experience. Now, Harper's Ferry. Now, how many of you been to Harper's Ferry? Okay, probably about half of you. Hey, Bob. What about back there? All right. If you've ever been to Harper's Ferry, you know that Harper's Ferry basically sits between 3... What happened to the dog? Oh, there he is. It sits between 3 heights. Can you help me for a minute? And so... Yes, sir. I need tall people. Come over here. You're going to be loud. Oh, no, you'll be Bolivar. You're the short one. You go over here. They're the lowest height. You come over here. Just face me. Right here, right here. Who we got tall? Come over here. Face me. Right here. And so, face me. So, I'm Harper's Ferry. And Harper's Ferry is surrounded by 3 heights. Now, I'm not facing the correct way for everything, but we're not interested in that. Well, you have, on the Harper's Ferry side, meaning connecting with the city, you have Bolivar Heights. Over here, if I'm facing in this direction, you would have the Potomac River running this way, and you would have the Shenandoah River running this way. That's why Harper's Ferry is grounded as an arsenal, because you have water power, people. Right? They didn't have nuclear reactors. So you put your power, you need to make something, you put it near water. Okay, so you have 3 heights. Bolivar, Maryland, and Loudon. Well, the Confederates, when Robert E. Lee comes into Maryland, the Confederates, not to go into great detail in this, Robert E. Lee is surprised that the garrison in Harper's Ferry does not evacuate when he crosses the Potomac. They stay put. And that's a big deal, all right, because Lee then has to turn his army back around. And basically what happens, why I have these 3 people here, is it's a great operation, you know, and pretty, you know, for what they end up capturing, pretty bloodless from a Confederate standpoint. The Confederates envelop it from 3 different directions. In other words, they take Loudon Heights. And then they come over here and they get on the other side of Bolivar Heights, and then they're coming up toward Maryland. Well, if Maryland is across the Potomac over here, here's your escape route. Some people argue that Dixon Miles down here in lowly Harper's Ferry, dominated by these heights, should have withdrawn to Maryland Heights. He doesn't do that. Instead, he sends a force up the side of Maryland Heights in order to get to the top. One of those regiments that he sends up there is from the future Willard's Brigade. And one of those regiments, the regiment which he sent, was not the 39th. The regiment which he sent was one of the green ones. And they're coming up to the top. Now, why Dixon Miles, the garrison commander, did that, I don't know. He had 12,000 men to defend the post. Surely he had somebody that was a little bit better off or more experienced. And these Confederates coming toward them, meaning from the opposite side, you know. Oh, how are you? You come by yourself? I need to talk to you about some write-off. Come up here, will you? Stand right here. Mr. Yo. The Confederates coming from behind on Maryland Heights and the Union going to face them, those Confederates are from Lafayette McLaws division. And they include veteran combat units, which for you Gettysburg folks are Kershaw and Barksdale, specifically in the front. I need not tell you Civil War buffs how much experience, how much fighting these South Carolinians and these Mississippians had already had, you know, by the time September of '62. So anyway, on September 11th, two Confederate forces, Kershaw and Barksdale, began to pressure from Maryland Heights. The Union commander atop Maryland Heights requested reinforcements, and the 126th New York, under Colonel Eliakim, I hope I'm saying that right, Sherrill, was dispatched to the top. And it turned out to be a fateful decision. The New Yorkers were so green, ladies and gentlemen, what did I tell you? They've only been there 3 weeks. That Sherrill has them in the moonlight, in the pre-dawn darkness, he has them in the moonlight practicing loading their weapons. That's what we're talking about. And then they're sit to the front. So, who is this Sherrill that's going up the side of Maryland Heights? Sherrill's a congressman, elected in 1847. He becomes a state senator, elected in 1854. He is the chairman of the banking committee, so he must have been able to do numbers right there. In 1860, he purchased a large farm and moved to Geneva, wherever that is. And it's not Switzerland.
Right on top of Lake Seneca Lake.
Is it? How big is it today?
It's a fairly decent sized city. It's a smaller city.
Is it? Is there any small cities in New York?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
What's it get out of New York City? It's all small cities.
Oh, is it? I found that way about Illinois too. I drove from Chicago to St. Louis. It looked normal. Once I got out of there, I said, I could live here. Flat around here, nothing. I said, yeah, sounds like my kind of town. He marries, Sherrill marries. His wife stated after the war that she was married on the 8th of January in 1835 in Hamilton, New York. You got that one too?
I know where that is, yeah.
I even know the preacher's name, by Elder Harkle. I don't know who Mr. Harkle was, but he married her. I don't think his first name was Elder either. Okay?
That's where Colgate University is, Hamilton is.
Is it? Boy, I bet they got some good teeth there, don't they? You got a pretty smile. Some of you, that will be an acquired taste. Some of you must not have saw that. Okay. Yeah, we'll just leave that one. Okay. There is no church record of said marriage. And Mr. Harkle, the Reverend Mr. Harkle, died on the 7th of September in 1852. And she testified that they had no children. Now, Sherrill is 50 years old at the time of his enlistment. And his wife apparently and his wife apparently and family begged him not to go. And he reportedly said, here's that dog, "My country needs me. It is my duty to go." So here he goes. 126 ascends the bluff on September 12th and spent a pensive evening. The next morning, Kershaw's South Carolinians began to pressure the line. After firing 4 or 5 rounds, the New Yorkers fell back almost to the edge of the bluff. I mean, they're trying, they're shooting, but you can imagine, people, there's no preparing you for combat. Some of you, I probably got some combat veterans in this crowd right here. There's no preparing you for that. All you're hoping is that muscle memory will take over, and the soldier will fight. That's why you train so hard. Now, as they fell back, there was a lull in the fighting. Colonel Sherrill got them back in the line with a lot of exhortations, and the line held. During this short lull, the New Yorkers adjusted their cartridge boxes and talked things over. 45 minutes later, the South Carolinian men, Kershaw's men, came on again, this time with Barksdale's men. The New Yorkers said that, for you combat buffs out there, the New Yorkers said that the second time the South Carolinians attacked, they didn't have any skirmishers out front. What does that mean? They know where the enemy is. And they just came in. The New Yorkers testified that the South Carolinians waded into them and just started delivering volleys. Only disciplined troops can stand there and reload. You can imagine what it's doing to these New Yorkers. Because the South Carolinians are taking casualties, obviously, but they're absorbing them, and they keep firing, and they're probably firing at a better rate, and they're probably firing at greater accuracy. So the New Yorkers are getting mauled up here. So they start to fall back, especially after the Kershaw starts to work around the flank. And I don't know many men from any war that'll take a flanking. Sherrill attempted to rally his men, strolling the line, urging on all with his might while recklessly exposing himself. Well, the inevitable happened, and a Confederate bullet slammed into the side of Sherrill's face. Quote, tearing through both cheeks, knocking out several teeth, and wounding his tongue as to render him speechless. With that incident, it was only a short time, because they had to take him off the field. He's spitting teeth out. Before the New Yorkers broke. That had to hurt. The Union forces on Maryland Heights eventually had to give way and retreat to Harper's Ferry. Well, once you lose Maryland Heights, thank you for your patience, and I enjoy getting your picture in the mail too. Once the Confederates have gained, now the Union faced this way, the Union still holds Bolivar Heights. Let me get you to step forward toward her. But the Confederates have enveloped here. The Confederates, you step forward, have enveloped here, and now the Confederates hold Maryland Heights. Well, here's the Union. They're down here. So I don't know if my makeshift map is making any sense here. But what happens when you crown these two heights with artillery? You have no defense if you're a Union soldier. I mean, you can get hit from behind. The enemy is not only, attacking. A.P. Hill is coming from this way. If you're fighting over here on Bolivar Heights, you can get hit from behind. From Maryland, it's untenable is the word I'm looking for. And after only a few rounds, this is why I'm working toward it. That's a big part of the story. I wouldn't spend so much time on this. 12,000 Union soldiers surrender to Confederate forces at Harper's Ferry. It is the largest surrender of United States forces until Corregidor in World War II. That's in the Philippines. 12,000 men wiped off the map. Yeah. And A.P. Hill, to tie it all in for you Civil War buffs, A.P. Hill, has nothing to do with us, does the surrender. He's the one that's left behind to take the arms and sign the paroles and everything. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why A.P. Hill is last to the Battle of Antietam, because he's marching from Harper's Ferry. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. The Union forces are marched out. As for Sherrill, He returned to the regiment around January of 1863. I put this quote in. Dan Welch gave me this quote before it came out, some of the new material. But this is so cool that I didn't want to pass it up. So Sherrill comes back in January of 63. Quote, after receiving the wound, Sherrill first went to a military hospital near Washington and then on to Albany where he would, thank you, by the way, thanks for the heights. I won't hold you anymore, but you can stand there, I don't care. Because the wound was not healing properly, Sherrill first went to a military hospital near Washington and then on to Albany where he consulted another physician. Remember, he got hit in the mouth. Because the wound was not healing properly and the doctor could not determine what the problem was, he was unable to return to duty. Once he arrived in Geneva, he called on a local doctor to see if any relief could be found. This man, Dr. Potter, examined Sherrill's swollen tongue and decided to make a small incision, if you can imagine somebody cutting on your tongue, in order to see what the problem was. Upon cutting into the swollen tongue, the doctor discovered the cause of the discomfort. Part of a tooth was embedded in the colonel's tongue by the force of the musket ball as it passed through his cheeks. This fragment was carefully removed and the wound finally began to heal. Right there. So, the next time you're feeling bad, perhaps about whatever subject you might have, your spouse, taxes, me, always remember, it could be a lot worse. All right, so after Harper's Ferry, the brigade is paroled. When I say that, I don't mean criminal parole. Parole in the Civil War is where you sign a document and you pledge an oath that you will not fight again until you're properly exchanged. You're paroled. You give your word of honor. They would never do that today. All right? But yeah, the men were horrified to learn as they were going to Chicago that the 126th New York, the people that had been, those green soldiers that had been on Maryland Heights, were being castigated in the newspapers and military reports as the cause of defeat on Maryland Heights. The military commission, which was eventually called together, drew attention, quote unquote, to the disgraceful behavior of the regiment. Of course, the report did not mention the greenness of the regiment, the inadequacies of the forces on Maryland Heights, and just et cetera, the obstacles they were up against. It did not matter. While the brigade waited for exchange, one new recruit marching past the camp derisively called the New Yorkers, quote, the Harper's Ferry cowards. And this is a big point. Then the name stuck. It's a stigma, and the men became discouraged. Now let me reiterate this. The only unit, there were 4 regiments in Willard's brigade at Gettysburg. The only unit that was on that heights was the 126th. But the other 3 units, the 39th, the 111th, and the 125th, are all rolled up into the stigma. The brigade, not the regiment, is known as the Harper's Ferry cowards. This is September of 1862, or the fall of 1862, all right? Think about, the older I get, you know, time seems to go faster. The older I get. I don't know why that is, but everybody nodding their head. Oh yeah, man. I used to be 18, man. I smoked 3 packs a day. September of 62 to July of 63 is not that long a period. It's not. And think about how many battles, I'm going to try to stay on track here. Think about how many battles there were in Virginia between now and Gettysburg, between Antietam and Gettysburg. All right? I mean, these men from New York, through all those battles, never have a chance to redeem their reputation. They never have a chance until June of 1863, when they are finally exchanged a couple months before that, and they rejoin the Army of the Potomac. It is not until the Gettysburg campaign that they get that opportunity. So, they're exchanged on November 19th of 1862. The men were sent to the defenses of Washington. On January 6th of 1863, the brigade got a new commander. The brigade commander was a guy by the name of Alexander Hayes, who's got a statue up there, in case you forget about it. Big bushy beard. This was a good man for the job. Hayes was a strict disciplinarian, but he was fair. What do soldiers always want? They want competency and they want fairness. They want it across the board. They don't like favoritism, right? And they want their leaders leading from the front. Well, you got all three of those with Alexander Hayes. He trained this brigade to fight. He weeded out the incompetent officers and he promoted the good ones. Hence the 39th, right? Consolidates the companies down. If you can't handle it, we'll just consolidate you, right? So by the spring of 1863, Hayes would write, "The Harper's Ferry boys have turned out trumps." That's good, okay? "And when we do get a chance, look out for blood." The chance came on June 24th when the brigade was ordered to march north with Meade's army. When the brigade caught up with the Second Corps, Hayes' seniority got him promoted to command of the 3rd Division. Is it making sense now? All right, so this is where we get into us. In turn, what happens, people, out of 4 regiments, when the brigade commander gets bumped up, Corps, Division, Brigade, Regiment. When the brigade commander goes up to division commander, the senior regimental commander gets bumped up to brigade. See how that does? Senior in commission. And that is going to bring about George Willard, hence the word Willard's Brigade. He assumes command of the brigade a week before this battle. So, you've got all this turnover happening. Now, George Lamb Willard came from a distinguished military family, as his father and grandfather had served in the War of 1812 and Revolutionary War respectively. Despite his lineage, his family wanted the young man to take up a business profession. The Mexican War, though, however, provided Willard a chance for his own glory, and he subsequently was cited for gallantry at Chapultepec, and in 1848, on the personal recommendation of Winfield Scott, who's the commander-in-chief or the general of the army, Willard entered the army full-time as a 2nd lieutenant. So, in 13 years, he had gained the rank of captain. Nobody's excited about that. I thought he was doing pretty good, you know. But that's how slow it was, in all seriousness, in the peacetime army. Okay, but he's a regular captain. Now, Willard, at the beginning of the war, helped raise the 2nd New York and subsequently hoped to be elected colonel. This did not turn out. And instead he went to the U.S. Regular Infantry, 19th U.S. Infantry. He eventually accepted a colonelcy in the 125th. Why does he get a colonelcy in the 125th? Because he's a captain, a regular captain, not a volunteer captain, a regular. He holds a regular rank of captain in the United States Army, not the volunteer army, meaning he is a professionally trained military soldier from the United States Army. And so, what did I say earlier about the numbers? The higher you go, the later they're raised, right? 125th comes about, they need to have a vacancy. By this time, I'm sure competency is coming into clear view among the Union High Command. We need competent people. And so there you go. Willard gets that colonel slot. And so that's where he goes. 125th. This will happen on August 15th of 1862. His 35th birthday. Can you imagine having such responsibility at 35? We buying them down at Ole Miss. I'm tell you, we legal now. I'll tell you what, we had in the championship. All that purple and gold money y'all paid all them players. Yeah, that don't fly no more. We got real money down in Mississippi. What are we playing this year? Playing in Oxford?
I believe so, yes.
Probably so. They throw whiskey bottles at you in Baton Rouge now. You beat them. I've seen it.
Tough sport.
Tough sport. Them Cajuns get mad, man. All right. The men of the 2nd Corps marched to Gettysburg. Y'all like that little interlude? The men of the 2nd Corps marched to... Only Matt gets the LSU fan on the front row. The men... Taunting me. The men of the 2nd Corps marched to Gettysburg on the night of July 1st and encamped behind Big Round Top. Some of you can see Big Round Top over here. So they're parked behind somewhere back there on Tawnytown Road. On July 2nd, Willard's brigade awoke and marched into position on Cemetery Ridge. So they would have marched, where you see that traffic, that yellow house over there, they would have marched right up this road right here, ladies and gentlemen. And at some point, probably over here on your left, you may have to step out. But somewhere over this red barn and so forth, the 2nd Corps is just going to turn and they're going to start marching up the slope and start deploying. Now, Hayes' division was marched up to Ziegler's Grove and the Bryan Farm, which for you Gettysburg novices is the white farm past the high water mark. Some of you can probably see it from here. Hayes' division, and this was comprised on the march, had 3 brigades. First one was Colonel Samuel Carroll. Second one was Thomas A. Smith, or Smythe, however you might say that. And the third one is Willard's brigade. Interestingly, the division was not deployed, but placed in columns of regiments, with one brigade placed in reserve. And Willard's was that reserve brigade. All right, so they put Carroll on the front line, and they put Smythe on the front line, and they put Willard in reserve. That's very important, because, ladies and gentlemen, Carroll's brigade is subsequently going to go to where?
East Cemetery.
He's going to go to Cemetery Hill. And so Carroll will be gone, Smythe will be left, and Willard will still be in reserve. Keep that in mind when Hayes receives the order to dispatch a brigade. Who is the natural selection to send southward in this direction? Willard. Willard is, thank you, Willard is going to be the natural selection. All right, any questions so far? I'm going to about face you. Yes, sir, I like that.
With regards to the moniker Harper's Ferry Towers, is there any, what's the German population of this brigade, other than the 39th? And so is there any German prejudice involved in this? Maybe? Oh, the battlefield is the most equal equality. If you want equality, the battlefield is equality in some form. I mean, there's no, how can you have discrimination with no rules? I mean, there are no rules in combat. One second. I don't think that's part of it. I think I would liken it more, instead of an ethnicity thing. I know where you're coming from, because you're talking about the 11th Corps and the German immigrants and the primarily and so forth in there, and they had units that were primarily speaking German. I need not speak to you. We have German monuments on this battlefield. I don't know if you ever read them. I never could read them, but we have German monuments out there. I think it's more like schoolboys. I think it's more like elementary school, where you're just sitting out there and they just, a bunch of teenagers taunting each other. And, people get serious. Some people, well, maybe not much anymore, but, in the South, people get real serious about your honor, Calling somebody a coward or something, that reflects on your community. And see, you made it. And that reflects upon your character. So, you know, the stigma. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, I've never heard that it was a stigma over the Germans right there. And they had a bad showing. Now, on the other hand, I don't know if anything was going to stop Kershaw. They had more Confederates. They didn't send enough Union troops. He half committed to it. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But then again, you know, it's like putting a rookie driver out on the NASCAR track. You know, he's going to bump a few people before he figures it all out, you know. As they go around through there, that's a bad analogy right through there. So, no, I just think they had a bad showing there in their defense. What were you going?
I was going to ask about the language barrier, because you were talking about the nationalities of the various groups and thinking they don't.
What I didn't mention. What was the guy's name? Somebody say it again. Diutasi. Diutasi could speak fluently four different languages.
Sure.
That's probably why he's getting these different ethnicities, the Hungarians, the Germans. He's recruiting them primarily, I think, out of New York City.
Yeah.
You know, they used to have like ethnic neighborhoods. Probably not true today, but they used to have like ethnic neighborhoods. So they would just go in there and they would find the community leaders. That's primarily how they got the German Americans. You look at Karl Schurz, for example. I mean, a very prominent German American right there. The Irish Americans, what are they doing? They have the ulterior motive, or at least Marr does, Marr has the ulterior motive of trying to train an army in America to go liberate Ireland. So, you know, you've got, subsequently go liberate Ireland, you know. So you've got all these little subplots, other motivations. But for the private soldier, for just the average Joe in the ranks, you know, he's probably trying to prove himself to a new country.
But it wouldn't surprise me that they have all of these units who are from one country or another, because
yeah,
they can communicate. They can talk to one another as opposed to disseminating them throughout the whole.
Yeah, but they didn't, not particularly in the 39th or anything. They just had a bunch of that, and that's what made it stand out. What else? What's not making sense? Besides the Tax Act of 1765. It's not making sense. All right, what we want to do, if you'll make like the Red Sea, we're going to park, and I'm going to about face y'all. Y'all don't plan on leaving the platform. I want to go down below, and so y'all can, if y'all go to either edge or get along the edges down there, you can face outward, and I think this is going to be one of the best views you get of the terrain that we're about to walk. Let me go out. And now take a look up toward the Bryan farm. Can you see? I can see what you can see. I got a tree in my way. Where you see that white tent, the Bryan farm is on the other side of that white tent out there. Okay. Now where I'm talking about, where that white tent is on the other side of that, this is the terrain I'm talking about. I just wasn't going to write you down. Willard has not moved yet. Around 10 o'clock in the morning of July 2nd, the stillness was broken by Confederate and Union skirmishers fighting out in front. That would be at the Bryan farm. Now, the 39th New York, being the most experienced unit, was dispatched to the Bliss Farm area and eventually joined by the 126th New York. What did Hayes do there? He dispatched the two regiments that had experience now. See what he did? The heavy skirmishing on the morning of July 2nd cost the 39th New York 28 casualties at the Bliss Farm. And this, for these other green rookies, is the first time they're seeing comrades being pulled back with, they're carrying extra muskets. They're seeing men that were 5 minutes ago healthy and they're coming back with holes in them. And they're seeing, of course, hearing about for the first time dead men. A lot of these New Yorkers, all right? And that's probably not consoling. Now, this quote was given about the skirmish by a private. And I really don't, I'm not spending a lot of time on the Bliss Farm, but the quote was so good. One of these quotes that you get every once in a while from a private where they tell you how it was. You know, one of them, you know, sometimes they'll slip off the 19th century flowery language and tell you. This soldier commented, quote, "But in a soldier's life, you're supposed to go where you are sent and no back talk. At the same time, as long as there was a spark of vitality about us, we were always looking out for number one." Who writes that? You would stand transfixed with horror sometimes if you should give away to your sensibilities. But a soldier is supposed to pass death by as a natural consequence, paying no attention to anything, only your duty as a soldier. Gaping wounds or headless trunks are often scenes you will come in contact with. You may step in pools of blood over the quarters of your shoes. Think about that for a minute. Such are the results of war. Now, they're getting a tasteful of it. All right, let's get this started. Ladies and gentlemen, see, I knew if I wore this rain suit.
There you go.
Did Elvis ever take his pants off? Y'all stay. Y'all stay there 1 second. Right here, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be, I'm getting in the weeds with you, but this is a battle walk, so I'm going to try to do big picture down to small picture. You got Union troops lining all the way through here on July 2nd. You can look to your right. You people up top can look to your right, facing me, and you can see the monuments going up Cemetery Ridge. You can face to your left, and you can go down through here, and you don't see that many monuments. You mostly see artillery markers. More about that in a minute. On July 2nd, this was the site of Caldwell's division of Union General Winfield Scott Hancock's 2nd Corps. Caldwell's division is in this area. I don't know if they were ever deployed or not. To their left, to your left, the Union left, is going to be Dan Sickles' 3rd Corps. I've said this 1,000 times, but out of 7 Union Corps commanders, Dan Sickles is your only non-West Point graduate. Now, here's your preservation message. My boss says I always need to be more concise, stick to a theme, and give a preservation message. So here's the preservation message. The first 2 I don't know about. Your ancestors did not drive diesel trucks. Your ancestors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about your Civil War ancestors. I'm talking about your daddy. I'm talking about your mama. I'm talking about your grandparents. They bought you this with their tax money. They paid it forward for you to have the ability to stand here on this day, rainless day, and look up at that high ground right out in front. That ridge that slopes upward. And I saw a presentation one time where, I hate to misquote, but like 20-something different land transactions had to take place in order to get back the original 400 acres of the Rose Farm. Ladies and gentlemen, there used to be a Stuckey's at the peach orchard. Mamie Eisenhower used to shop there. You know, with little thimbles, you know, Grandma used to keep, you know what I'm talking about? You put in the little thing. Anyway, they paid for all that. They wiped off the modern intrusions and gave this back to you. On July 2nd, because of this, on July 2nd of 1863, you get to make the same decision. Dan Sickles is sitting down here where you see that lift off in the distance. And he is a worried man. He has not deployed his corps. He views that the ground in front of him is a better position to occupy than the one he has ordered. He is ordered to connect his right flank. Remember, I'm reversed. He is ordered to connect his right flank with the 2nd Corps and his left flank over here at Little Round Top. Well, in one of the boldest moves of the war, Dan Sickles, as you all know, is going to take his men from this position and he is going to move them out to that high ground along the highway. Now, that's the purpose of this program is not to debate Dan Sickles again. I'm sure there's some tape. I'm sure Stuffy's got some tape on it somewhere, right? The purpose, though, is because of Sickles' move, this is why Willard gets involved. That's the big picture. There's no Union troops where we're about to walk. As we're walking in the footsteps of Willard's brigade. So how does Willard get here? All right, the first thing that happens after Sickles moves out there is that the Confederates come into position. But as you all know, most of you know, the Confederates don't come into position until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or they don't step off until 4 in the afternoon. When Longstreet and his Confederate command step off, they hit the Union line over there at the base of Little Round Top, Devil's Den, Wheatfield, Peach Orchard. They hit Sickles so hard, and by this time George Meade has found out what has happened, and he is forced to support Sickles. So Caldwell's division, the men that were originally here, are some of the first units that are dispatched down to the Wheatfield, all because of Sickles' move. Well, Caldwell leaves, and that's a huge gap. Well, they need more men, so they go galloping up. The other 2 divisions of the 2nd Corps are under Gibbons and under Hayes. Both Hancock sends a messenger off and says, I need reinforcements. Who can you dispatch? Of course, 1 brigade will be dispatched from Gibbon, and then another one is needed from Hayes. Who is in reserve in Hayes' brigade? Willard. So, we'll get moving here. If you look behind you and up Cemetery Ridge, Willard's brigade, if you look at that tour road, I can't see it, but I know it's there. Willard's brigade would be to the right of the tour road as you look north. They wouldn't march down the tour road. Why wouldn't you march a brigade down the present day tour road?
Because it wasn't there.
That's right, because you could see them. And what would the Confederates do if they could see them? They'd shell them. They'd shoot them. Yeah, it's not a trick question. So you would be in defilade. I would be so torqued if I was a soldier and my commander marched me on the crest. Man, that would just really tick me off. Not that I would say anything about it or anything, you know. Yeah, so they're marching down this road. Reportedly, Alexander Hayes, the division commander, went up to Willard, George L. Willard, and he says, I want you to march, and he pointed in this direction, and I want you to go down there and knock the hell out of the Rebs. Seems pretty plain to me. But, point of order, and we'll move off. Willard's brigade is headed, I don't know specifically, but they're headed to the vicinity of the Wheatfield. That's where they're headed as they're marching down through here. They're going to give help to the other Union soldiers. So as we get on the tour road, ladies and gentlemen, y'all please keep your head on the swivel. We're going to march down to where you see those cars off in the distance, and we won't spend much time, but we're going to come marching all the way back here to where we are today, and then we're going to snake our way out until this underbrush. Willard's brigade is going to run into some trouble as they're marching down this tour road and be ordered into position. What I'm asking you to do before we step off is when you get down on the level with me, when you get down on ground level, you can't see as well as you can up there, especially when I take you out in this field. So what I'm asking you to do is look at the landscape. Most of the fighting is going to be done in that swell in front of you. And the reason I've got you positioned like that is to give you some sort of bird's eye view as to what it actually looked like, as you know, from above. Any questions? What you got?
When Willard moves, have they already started shooting out on the Emmitsburg Road?
Have they already started shooting on
The Emmitsburg Road.
Yes, Yes, we're going to get into that. Sickles is being hit, and it's falling apart, and that's the reason that they're going in the line so quickly. It's a lot cooler than I thought. Get outside these pants. What else we got? Give me another question so I can get my pants off.
So they were headed to the wheat field?
Well, they're headed to the south end. I can't, specifically say they never got there, but I think they're thinking they're going further than they are, But all that's about to change on a dime. I've never read. It's hard to get soldiers to. Now my butt's wet. It's hard to get soldiers to talk about what was supposed to happen. Soldiers talk about what did happen. That's the hardest thing, to get out of it. And as you'll see, the people that had all the information, they don't make it. So that's an information vacuum in its own. What else we got?
Chronologically, is this right after the first Minnesota delaying action?
You're hitting, you wait till I get there. You wait till I get there, all right? But you will see, in answer to your question, you'll see it go both ways. I've heard it argued both ways. Now, I argue the reverse. I think it's the second, but we'll see. To each his own. It's not far apart. How about that? What else?
Where's the people?
Can y'all see? Can somebody point it out to him? I'm too low. Can you see the bushes up there?
Like valley?
No, it's a little bit over to the left.
Okay.
It's beyond this.
That's a long path.
Where did I get those little girls from? I should have put them in the line a while ago.
You'll use them later.
Well, they must really be earning this.
Oh, they are.
Oh God.
I'll have to do my penance.
Daddy done got you out here. At least it's not raining, huh? Let's walk down. Let's convene down here at this stop sign. Convenient. Yeah. I always throw my jacket into random cars, and just figure it out later, Young wife. Kill an old man. Are you? Birthday? Oh, congratulations. Is that what? Yeah, I know, man. Yeah, I don't celebrate it much anymore. Yeah, well, happy birthday. All right. All right, so when somebody was asking me at the last stop, about, find out, I should have numbered these pages, was asking me at the last stop what the order of things was the Third Corps coming apart. I think that in the time period between Willard's marching down the backside, now you can see it real well, but by Willard marching straight toward us, Willard's brigade, about 1,500 men, would have been marching in a column right toward us and right through us and headed out this way. I think that from the time that they start marching on the ridge, that's when about the time that the line starts falling apart along the Emmitsburg Road in front. Humphrey's division for you Gettysburg bus. I think that's about time. Now, I can't say pinpoint that the whole line is going to pieces, but I can tell you, and this is very typical of battles, any battle, that the New Yorkers start talking about how many dozens of Union soldiers are coming through that field. So if the line hasn't broken, it's definitely starting to disintegrate because you got all these Union soldiers. Now, you can imagine being a green soldier and you're already amped up. I don't know if you ever get used to it, even as a veteran. But you can imagine with the wounded coming through you at this point, and imagine these people are just freaked out. That's what they don't capture. Scared soldiers. I mean, some of them are just delirious. I mean, it's just, that's a battlefield for you. It would happen on both sides. But the one thing, I don't know if you've ever been in a riot or something where you're caught up in an energy of a crowd. It's weird how electricity can go. I was at the Monsters of Rock concert in Memphis, at the Liberty Bowl, and a mini riot broke out, you know, and I was sitting there throwing stuff too, you know. Not what I intended to do, but it seemed like the thing to do is pelt people with hot dog wrappers, you know. You know, funny. I thought it was funny, but it was kind of cool. We were on the field, you could see all this stuff flying around, you know. Heavy metal, you just had to have been there. But yeah, so that's a problem. So here they come. Here comes Willard's Brigade. Now, as we go down through here, ladies and gentlemen, why don't we do this? Why don't we cross to the left side of the road? We'll stay on the grass on this side of the cars, and we don't have to worry about y'all. If y'all want to be on the pavement, you go ahead, but I'm going to take the majority of the group on the grass. I've learned a long time ago not to tell Americans what to do. All right. I suggest that you. Oh, hey, man. I suggest you go on the pavement. Now you'll go on the grass, right? So there you go. All right. So let's walk on down. As we walk down, keep viewing to your right. You're following the same view. I want to get physical. Let's hear your body talk. Pat Benatar? Right?
Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, Olivia Newton-John. Okay. I thought she was country. Woo, you better marry rich. Oh, you'll never be able to replace your daddy. Thank you. Y'all could have texted somebody and get me over 100 now.
It's 5 more.
Yeah. All right. One of the cool things that I didn't mention was that Hancock himself personally rode with the men partly way. I can't tell you where he got on and where he got off, but he was with Willard's Brigade part of the way down here. Now, what I don't know, I know because I'm preempt this question, is I don't know the exact moment that Hancock is ordered to take command of Sickles' Corps. I'm getting a little ahead of the story, but I can't name the exact moment. I don't know anybody that can. So was it after it disintegrated? I always put Sickles getting wounded late in the action, because I always thought, and this is just hypothetical, but it's plausible, that Sickles is hit from a Confederate gun near the peach orchard along the Emmitsburg Road. So that would mean that that position had to be cleared out by that point. So we're talking, the point being, we're probably talking around, I can't present the exact moment, but somewhere around 6 o'clock. A couple hours of fighting has occurred. It's really loud down here, and Willard's Brigade has been dispatched. They weren't dispatched immediately, but it's coming fast, you know. So around 6 o'clock, I would say 6:30, Barksdale's going to crack the peach orchard. That would put, I don't know how long it took Willard to march down here, but let's say it took him 15 minutes to get here, 20 minutes, maybe 30 getting everybody up. You're probably now looking at 6:30, 7 o'clock by the time these New Yorkers are getting to this spot. All right, so the Confederates, it's very hard for Willard's men to get an eye on the situation. Now this rain kind of helps me a little bit, but the swell, the trees which you see right here, ladies and gentlemen, they would have been lower. They would have been scrub trees. Why is it growing up today? Because we can't, it's a swell, and we can't get a bush hog in there. So it's too many rocks. There's boulders in there, and anybody that run a tractor knows you can't put a bush hog down in there, you know. So, but apparently the park just bought a machine that's going to do it. So, not a bush hog, but one of them, I forget what they called it. It's a mean machine though. It's got arms on it, you know. It just whacks things as it comes through. Apparently it was developed by a member of the mafia. Okay, but apparently it'll take out anything. Even Mount St. Joseph. All right. So, put the trees smaller. Oh, I see somebody already put some flags out there. You know, there's some person goes around here and puts these little plastic laminated signs out next to some of the statues. Have y'all ever seen that? Put an inscription, a love note on it. You seen them, sir? On it? Yeah, I wonder if that's that same person that puts it on there. I'd like to know who that was. Anyway, a brief halt ensued. The time must have felt like an eternity. I want you to put smoke in here, people. It's cloudy. I want you to put white smoke in there, so thick that you can't see among that swell, or it's very difficult. I mean, it would look like somebody set off a fog machine out there. Now, out of that smoke is going to be coming what? As the New Yorkers are standing right here. Out of that smoke, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be coming hundreds of 3rd Corps soldiers back toward this position. Willard deployed his brigade with the 125th New York on the left and the 126th on the right. He held back his other 2 regiments in reserve, the 39th New York on the left and the 111th New York on the right. Both regiments about 200 yards behind the line. So 200 yards is no joke. All right, so if he deployed, I don't know the exact spot, but if the 125th and the 126th deployed here, what happened? I need people. Come on. Just stand here. You know, it's the easiest job in the world. If you got people. Stand here. Stand beside her, right there, and then I need 2 more people to stand behind them. Come on. All right. You coming too? All right. There you go. So here's Willard's brigade right here. Right here, raise your hand. This is the 125th. The 126th. Right here, 125th, 126th, 111th, 39th. Right here. Notice how they have 2 regiments in front, 2 regiments behind. That's the way that Willard deploys them. This second line is 200 yards behind the first line. So I don't know the exact spot, but 200 yards would put the 2 regiments somewhere over in here. I would say that's an easy guess right here. So this line is right in this area back in here. Well, they face about. Now use your imagination. You got the 125th, you got the 126th. They're posted toward this swell. Smoke, confusion, hundreds of people coming out. One of those regiments, barely the other one, has fired a shot in the war. I mean, 125th, I mean, they got balls zipping around them all of a sudden. And people are starting to get hit. So anyway, the left of the brigade was behind a row of artillery set up by Freeman McGilvery. Hancock ordered Willard to forward his brigade, quote, to the fringe of the undergrowth in the swell to their front. Fringe of the undergrowth is in quotation marks. So what do you call fringe of the undergrowth? It's where you see those trees. That's where he's ordered to take them. Put the trees smaller. And they would have had animals out there. Now, why is Willard deploying behind artillery, ladies and gentlemen? Why is this artillery here?
Because there was no infantry.
Because there was no infantry. For the people with the Lano map, you can see them start throwing the batteries. Now look to your right. See all the artillery pieces? All these artillery pieces doesn't necessarily mean they're here on July 2nd. Some of them are from July 3rd. But nevertheless, the batteries are being thrown in position. Big picture, ladies and gentlemen. There are no Union troops beside Willard right here. So if Willard is marching this way, and they're marching in column, Hancock halts them, and they face about to the right. If the truth was known, y'all face to your left. If the truth was known, they may have been marching like this by the left flank. That would make sense because your column wouldn't be as long. And if you're trying to expedite something, you double the column up, right? That's just a guess on my part. But as they're marching south, Hancock orders them to halt and then face to the right. When they face to the right, they go from column and they go into battle line. And the 125th and the 126th are going to start pushing forward out into this field. And you can just imagine the tension. So between these three regiments, these two and this one, you have 900 men, or excuse me, about 1,200 men in the brigade coming forward. Now opposing them as they come out in the field, if you look not at this closest barn, but that red barn up on the hill, that's the Sherfy farm. Now the gentleman that was asking me a while ago, now you can see the peach orchard. If you look at the red barn and you look to the left of that, you can, doesn't stand out well in the haze, but there's some bushes. If you keep going following the hill, there's kind of I don't know what that is. I guess that's the artilleryman monument that I'm seeing, that dark thing. Those bushes behind him is the peach orchard. That is where the first significant Confederate breakthrough happens. And that's going to be Barksdale's Mississippians. Now, how many men they have after they break through the line? You know, Barksdale breaks through this line, and if he gets out to the peach orchard, he's over here. He breaks through the peach orchard, and then he wheels to the left and dresses to the right. And so these Union soldiers out here, face that way. That way. When Barksdale breaks through, here's the highway. Barksdale breaks through, and he wheels to the left. Now what am I doing to the Union soldiers where you see those monuments up there?
Rolling them
I'm just
up.
rolling them up. I'm raking them up. And that, ladies and gentlemen, coupled with Barksdale hitting them here, and then Anderson's division of A.P. Hill hit them from the front. That's going to be Wilcox, Lang, etc. The Confederate attack is rolling this way, and it's breaking in. Anyway, the point being, the soldiers that Willard is seeing is coming from the remnants of what Barksdale is tearing through. That's where all these hundreds of soldiers are coming from, because they're dissolving and they're going back. So Barksdale marches down the road, and basically between this red barn and that red barn, he takes he instead of heading this way, he turns this way, and he's headed right toward us. That's why Willard happens to be at the right place at the right time. I'm going to break for questioning, because this is the big picture, and you're not going to get the small picture unless you get the big picture. There are no Union infantry on this ridge, on this portion of the ridge, except for Willard's brigade and past the PA Memorial, a small regiment of Minnesotans. If the Confederates get here, look to your left. There's Little Round Top. Look to your right. There's Cemetery Ridge. If the Confederates get here, the Taneytown Road is right behind you. You cut the fish hook in half. You break the fish hook line, and you cut the Taneytown Road. Hancock orders Willard forward. So what you have, I don't know how many men they have. We'll say around 900 men left from Barksdale's brigade, minus losses. But you see, and they would have been filtering in, hundreds of Mississippians starting to filter into that swell right there. But they're discombobulated. A lot of them are out of ammunition. A lot of them are without officers. A lot of units have been intermingled. It's a lot of confusion. The Mississippians are disorganized. Willard's men may be green, but they have unit cohesion. So they start down through this area, and they start pushing toward the Confederates. One other thing, we'll get to the fighting. Barksdale, ladies and gentlemen, I see most maps coming in. And they have all the Confederates lined up in a pretty row going along that swell right there. You have to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, and this is slightly off, it's not really changing anything, but you have to know this in order to understand Willard right here. Barksdale is coming from not this way. Barksdale initially comes from this way. In other words, the Confederates are wheeling in the line as they come out, into the swell. So the majority of Mississippians, I think, would be down here by this closest barn, Barksdale's brigade, and be going this way. How many gaps were between the two? How many hundreds of yards, I do not know. But I picture it as the mass of Confederates would be between the barn and that dead tree that you see up above, just as a marker somewhere in that area. All right, so what does that mean? Willard's brigade is going to do what? They're going to pretty much lean to the left. When they're firing, the majority of those two regiments are shooting to their left. That's going to make sense better when we get out in front. What else we got?
Where's Humphrey's guys coming off the Emmitsburg road roll? Where are they retreating back to?
They don't know. They don't have any idea where they're going. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and you know, A.A. Humphrey, not to get off into this, but man, he sure seems to fight his division poorly. And nobody ever seems to take him to task. I mean, he doesn't even get the troops up on the military crest. I've often wondered how he got away with that. But they liked him, and his middle name's a fine name. Fine name right there. No relation. But remember, too, the Union line is dissolving from your left to the right. Don't move. But it's basically, as I've said a dozen times, it's a right hook and a left jab on Humphrey's division. And so they're just getting knocked loose. Now, do some units, I don't want to give you the wrong impression, some of those Union units conduct a fighting withdrawal.
Yeah, and Humphreys, he leads that. I mean,
Well, he's fighting it, but I mean, you know, you're pouring water on a sugar cube at this point, because they're just getting mauled. I mean, you can drive up there and see there's nowhere for them to hunt, to rally. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
well, don't you sometimes feel like Humphreys is looking at Sickles and saying, are you kidding me? This is where you're putting me? This is where I end up?
Yeah.
Out here in this position?
Oh, it's Sickles' ultimate decision, but what I mean by that is Humphreys, when you get up by the Rogers farm and so forth, those Union soldiers couldn't see like Wilcox's Alabamians until they were right on top of them, because they were in defilade. You know, which is the right thing to do up to the point where the advance begins. I just would like to know where Humphreys was, and why that, you know, didn't occur. It put them in a bad spot. The move forward is the first bad spot, and the way that they were positioned once they got out there was, they had a hard road, hard position to defend. Sir?
What artillery was supporting Willard when he went forward?
What does Lano say? What batteries?
Thompson, Phillips, Dow, Sheldon.
Thompson, Phillips, Dow, and Sheldon. Say again?
With all that movement going on there and artillery coming from the Union side and the Confederate side, is there any documentation of like friendly fire amongst, you know, casualties?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Not in this particular, yes, actually in this particular instance, I'm getting ahead of the story. But Willard got, I probably wouldn't say it anyway, Willard got out there and he was receiving, he was taking a few friendly fire. I'm not saying it was heavy, but he noted they were getting shot in the back. You know, ordnance prematurely exploding, for example. You know, things happen all the time that, bad example, but a good example. We lost more people in the Gulf War from friendly fire than we did. You know, mistakes just happen on any battlefield.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Was it Barksdale's actual order to go up the Emmitsburg Road, and why did he change?
Why he changed is because Wilcox was coming across his front, so he conformed to Alabamians. And you hit upon something there, sir, that I've never been able to ascertain as far as the Confederates. There are orders, I don't know of any orders that I ever saw that told them what they were supposed to do once Anderson came online. In other words, if they're moving this way, and this is Anderson and I'm Barksdale, I can't march in front of him, my friends, you know, because we'd be doubling up. So what Barksdale, he must have made the decision on himself, or maybe they naturally conform. Barksdale conforms with Wilcox, and they go forward. Are they touching? I don't know. You know, there's probably a gap in there. right there, but that's why they're switching.
At this time, Matt, is all the artillery that's on Wheatfield Road pretty much back here now? Does artillery have them on this line, or are they running into some of those guys?
Most of the cannons that are coming online are coming from behind you. They're coming from the artillery reserve, which, for lack of a better word, is somewhere back around the Spangler, the modern day Gettysburg foundation. That's Spangler. What's his first name? George. And so they're coming forward from there. The Union just had a much better, well, they had more guns, and they had better guns, and they had better ammunition. But the Army organization, they had Henry Hunt, and the South didn't have Henry Hunt. And you can't put a price on Henry Hunt. Very competent man.
You mentioned like Phillips Battery, because Phillips was out there, and they end up back here. So some of those guys.
Yeah. What guns that were left? I bet if you looked at the battery, though, I doubt they're bringing the whole battery in the section. They'll probably bring in guns that have enough ammunition left, or maybe I don't know what they did. Sometimes they would take guns and consolidate them on the fly, you know, ammunition chest, all that stuff. Alexander did that, for example, at the end of Pickett's charge for the Confederates. He was looking for guns that still had ammunition in the caissons. And so I imagine they deployed. But the big point I don't want you to miss out on is this is critical. We all know the end of the story, ladies and gentlemen. This is critical time for the Union Army. This is about, some people would argue, this is the closest the Confederates come to winning. I mean, they're however many hundreds of yards from that tree line right there. What we got? Let me get my paper. All right. Okay. From the peach orchard. There came a bus. Confederate artillery began to pound the area. Now that means the Confederates have taken possession. The New Yorkers dressed their lines, including the fixing of bayonets. Quote, "The venom of the old taunt, Harper's Ferry cowards, which had so long burned in the veins of this noble regiment, now excited them to fury." Remember that, because I'm going to come back to it. It excited them to fury. All right, and now the end of quote. And now these New Yorkers had a chance to avenge Harper's Ferry finally. Unbeknownst to them, against a unit that was actually part of their capture. Barksdale's Mississippians. Have you ever put that together? Right there. Yeah, I never put that together. All right, let's take a walk on down the road. We'll just continue down. We're going to continue. We'll come back here and we'll pick up the 125th and 126th. I'm going to do it a little out of order, folks. We're going to do the left flank. I'm not doing much on it, but I'm going to point out the 39th to you, Watson's Battery, and then we'll come on back and we'll make our way. Like your shirt? Thank you. I'm a company man myself. Somebody asked me one time, what's the most important battle in the war? And I thought about it a while. And I came to the conclusion it happened to be wherever I was working. The most important battle in the war. Which fluctuates from year to year, right? We're used to. Yeah. Well, ma'am, you're standing in the crater. This is the epicenter of everything that happened. I thought you might find this interesting. And I've mentioned this, but here's a quote. The New Yorkers, and it kind of gives you a timetable. The New Yorkers' advance was impeded by hundreds of 3rd Corps men fleeing through their lines. In fact, the number of Sickles soldiers almost disrupted Willard's line. Hancock himself even added, quote, "shouted orders or blistering curses to no avail." Hancock, I don't know if I said this, Hancock was relieved of command of the 2nd Corps and sent to command the 3rd Corps, which a lot of military observers have noted. Hancock was ordered to give up a perfectly good corps and go take command of one that was in shambles. But that's why Hancock is down here cussing. right? Because this is his new command. Now, here's the interesting part. The 111th New York opened their ranks to let 4 stretcher bearers carry General Sickles, minus a leg, to the rear. And they said minus a leg. So I wonder, you know, and I thought that was interesting, not that it wasn't still hanging there, but I wonder if if that leg was removed while he was on the field. You know, it was dangling by tendons, but I don't know. That's an interesting note. Maybe it was still attached or still not. I don't know. Be a question for Jim Hessler. Okay. Yeah. Oh, he'd know. What do you got on that hat?
Jim Hessler.
Yeah, these are
Jim Hessler got his own hat.
Yes, he does.
We'll get you to
Hessler got his own hat.
Atkinson
Man.
hats.
Okay. I know. Yeah, you couldn't wear those in family atmosphere. Oh, Hessler, huh? Got him a hat. Damn it. That'll do that. I can't stand. Many years ago, his competition addressing Gettysburg, they put merch online, right? And this was done as a joke, but I found it, I'm still interested in this. They made, remember when I was talking about Karate Elvis? They made a picture of me doing a sidekick like Karate Elvis, and they put it on some women's spandex pants, my picture of Karate Elvis. And do you know, somebody bought a pair? I was told. Now I want to know who's wearing Matt Atkinson Elvis pants going around.
Did
right
you get a cut of that?
No, I didn't get a
Oh,
cut.
NIL, man. NIL.
NIL all the way. Where'd that LSU guy go? New coach.
Name, image, and likeness.
Yeah.
You know, I think I saw that picture in a bar down in Philly.
Oh, well, I guess it beats the post office. How many people get that joke?
We're old enough to get that.
All right. All right. Now, the reason I grabbed this piece of shade, I was gonna walk y'all further, but this is fine enough right here. Absolution, yeah. This is actually, ladies and gentlemen, this is not absolution. This is fair catch Corby. Is what it is. Back when they used to have fair catches right here. Now they tell me at Notre Dame they got touchdown Jesus.
They do.
And my understanding is that the same monument
Yeah,
is
fair catch Corby too. Yeah.
Is it the same monument?
Yes.
Okay. That was my understanding.
In front of the cathedral.
Oh, it's in front of the
Or one of the
cathedral.
big churches there.
My understanding too, John Heiser told me this, although he didn't, we don't know the exact rock. The actual absolution happened behind the Pennsylvania Memorial. Probably somewhere where the maintenance yard is. Now how I'd have to look up, see how he found out here or whatever, but yeah. He's been fooling people for a long time. Right here. Anyway, we're on the left flank of Willard's brigade. I can't mark the exact spot. Remember, I'm not going to line these people up again. There were 2 regiments in front and 2 regiments behind. So once again, from left to right, 125th, 126th. On the rear line would be the 39th New York and the 111th. So somewhere back behind you would be the 39th New York. Now add in the story, I've said it a couple times now. There are hundreds of soldiers fleeing from the 3rd Corps. There was a staff officer from General Birney's command. How or why he's over here, I guess Birney's command is drifting this way too, you know, if you could imagine that. He rides up and he finds a battery commander. I believe the gentleman's name was Peebles. Somebody correct me on that. But Lieutenant Peebles, I believe, was in charge of Watson's battery, which is where you see that stone out there in the middle of the field. Now, not to get too far off the mark here, but when Barksdale breaks through, I told you he wheeled to the left and dressed to the right. His extreme right regiment, the 21st Mississippi, peels off and goes chasing this Union artillery, the 9th Massachusetts specifically. Those are the guns, or excuse me, the horses that you see dead in the Trossel farmhouse. Those are from the 9th Massachusetts Regiment. Those were shot by Mississippians, or the majority of them were shot by Mississippians. Right where that barn is right there. Well, the 21st Mississippi, which is broken away from Barksdale, it keeps advancing, and Watson's brigade, battery is down there where that stone is out in the distance. We now think, most people think, which, you know, is once again, welcome to Gettysburg, that Watson's battery was a little bit to the left, or that stone might be on the right half of the battery, but it's definitely not in the center. Okay, but anyway, the 21st Mississippi is going to end up overrunning those guns. The guns are being sacrificed to keep the Confederates from getting to where we are now. Now, Lieutenant Peebles runs across this staff officer, I'm sorry I can't remember his name, from Birney's command. And he's like, General, I need a regiment, I need somebody to retake my guns. And the staff officer, you know, looks at him as captain, and he says to him, well, how many men do you need? And he says, I think a regiment will do it. Well, that staff officer goes riding from Peebles, wherever he met him. That probably happened over here around the Weichert farm. And he rides over here to where we are, to wherever the 39th New York. And this guy comes riding up to the commander of the 39th New York, and he says to him, I am from General Birney, and I order you to advance and take that battery. Well, the colonel stands up and he says, hang on a minute. I'm not with General Birney. I'm with General Hancock. So, you know, basically I'm not in your command. And the staff officer sits there for a second on horseback, and then he says, by order of General Hancock, I'll order you to retake that battery. And you know, the guy did it. He stood up the 39th New York, once again the most veteran unit which they had from here, and they started advancing, and they probably would have come right through here to your left, and they would have advanced over to where you see that tree line, which I don't think would have been as thick as it is. And it boils down to this point as to who is correct about what. Humphrey says, and once again, please try to keep up with me, I think the 39th comes at the end of this action. But I'm not going to walk you down here twice, so we're going to cover it here and then walk back and do the rest of the action. I think the 125th and the 126th are already advancing to the swell if they're not already in it, when the 39th, the last reserve unit, is sent out here to take that battery. Why do I make that assumption? Because Colonel Humphreys, B.G. Humphreys of the 21st Mississippi, writes about that he was withdrawing anyway because of the rest of the brigade was being pushed back. So in other words, he's out here, the Mississippians, the 21st Mississippi, he felt he was out here on an island, and he couldn't hold the battery by himself. According to the 39th New York, it was a knockdown drag-out, retaking the battery. I don't know, you know. So, you know, it's kind of like Chamberlain and Oates. I mean, where's the truth in all this? But regardless, the 39th New York is going to retake Watson's battery from there. Now, why is the marker off? We think the marker is off today because when the veterans came back, there was a modern road that was not here at the time of the battle. And we think that the modern road compared to the historic road, which is today the horse trail, as you come up United States Avenue, that's the historic road. We think that the veterans got that mistaken in their head with the modern and the original farm road. So they're off by a little bit. But, you know, welcome to Gettysburg. If we had a time machine, we'd probably come back and find out everybody was wrong. Everybody. Harry, fine, everybody. And that Stonewall Jackson was really here. So what we're going to concentrate on, we're going to leave the 39th behind, and we're going to start our walk back, and we're going to concentrate on the last three regiments. The 111th in the rear, and on the front line, the 125th and the 126th. Any questions as we go back? How am I doing? Oh, not bad. I should say, because I just got a notice from here, and and it's public knowledge, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I found out this morning that licensed battlefield guide Phil Cole has passed. The gentleman wrote Artillery of Gettysburg. What else? He had several books. That's Blue and Gray on the magazines and so forth. He was one of the more prolific writers, had his own publishing company. And anyway, when I stand here, I turn around, I stand here and I look at these artillery pieces. It reminds me of Phil. Anyway, let's take a walk back. Oh, motorcycles coming. We might as well stand here. We'll go ahead and have a reenactment.
It's like that ad where kids are playing street hockey.
Let's do this. How you doing? Let's cross the road when we go back this time. Let's walk on this side. That's what the plan is. We're going to go down the horse trail, not West Confederate. I'm not doing that.
Did you say Carlton Smith's doing?
Carlton's doing Willard for the anniversary. He's going to go off the whole L. He's going to take you from Bryan down to here. Yeah.
How did your home improvement project go? Remember I was talking to you about it?
Wood hardening. You know, we called in somebody else. I need to talk to you about that, by the way. Don't you be slipping off on me. I thought you were retired. Well, you're out of retirement.
No, I'm not retired.
Okay. Okay. All right. So here they go. The 125th and the 126th are coming down through here. These two regiments, as I said, the Mississippians are over here. I think they're more concentrated to the left, or where you see the depression. I think the way that they came in and as disorganized as they had to be, because they went through like 2 or 3 Union lines, maybe 4, you know, depending on the fighting withdrawal. I think they were in rough shape, really rough shape. Now, hang with me, all right? So I put a little bit more than a mob mingling down here, several hundred men. So I put the 125th and the 126th headed sort of this way. Now that's a problem, because coming over here, not this first bushy tree, but that other one you see off in the distance. We're going to walk down there in a little while. That big oak, I guess is what it is, sticking up off in the distance over there. All right. Coming from that direction and that brown grass behind it is a whole brigade of Alabamians. Well, if you got 2 regiments in front, which I don't know, what, 600-700 men, you can and double ranks, you can imagine the front. But if you got Alabamians coming from this way, then you got a problem. Because what's going to happen? The further you advance in that field, what's going to happen? They're going to flank you. Right? So I picture the Alabamians coming from this way. So going back to the lineup, there's 2 regiments on front, 2 behind. 39th is left in reserve. The 111th that's in reserve in the rear line as the 2 front regiments move across, they are ordered to move by the right flank. In other words, come on up here. Where you been anyway? You're supposed to call me. Let's get you right here. Oh, story of my life. 39th New York, 111th New York, right here. Okay? As they're moving forward, I want to have them walk out in the grass. The 111th New York starts to move by the right flank this way. I don't know where, but somewhere in this vicinity, and they face to the left. Now, when they face to the left, their left flank apparently doesn't clear the right flank of the 126 out here. So they're actually marching kind of in tandem behind them. Now, eventually, and they're 50 yards. So I told you at the beginning, I'm trying to get you all this detail to show you how quick this is moving out here. They closed the distance from 200 yards to 50 yards. and they're marching behind them, but apparently the left flank couldn't shoot from here until eventually they get to the swell out there, and the 111th is able to clear, and they have a 3-regiment front. The reason I say that they cleared the front is, and to reiterate this again, is I think those two front regiments, original two front regiments, are leaning to the left, right? And so the 111th is brought up by Willard because he doesn't want those Alabamians coming up here and shooting down the line. So they're extending the lines. That makes sense to everybody? But as he moves sort of this way, he uncovers my left flank. And so it sort of just works out, so they come in the line. Now, was it as pretty as I just made it? No, probably not. There's a lot of confusion, especially with green troops. They probably fumbling all over themselves out here in this field. But they're getting it done. They're still here.
So is their final position, it looks like it's a little convex out there. You know what I mean? Like we've got a little bit of a curve towards the Emmitsburg Road, so that it's easier for them to uncover. I'm just looking, you know.
Well, I also
just
look
the way
at
the terrain runs.
Yeah. Let me ask if I'm answering your question. There's a small stream in that wood line.
Yeah.
And so basically the trees follow the lowest part of the ground. That's a given right there. So as they descend into it, the way I picture it, like this high ground that's in front along the fence line right here. The New Yorkers get up to that, and I don't think they can see the Mississippians very much until they get out to that fence line. Does that make sense? And that's where the Mississippian, this is the hardest thing for me to explain to you. I think they're discombobulated. I think they're disorganized. Are they shooting at them? Yeah, they're shooting at them, but organized units and so forth. And the smoke, once again, people, is heavy. Heavy. So the New Yorkers start walking into them. And when I say walking into them, the way I picture it is they are moving and firing as the line moves up. I mean, just like you're taught to do. You advance and fire, advance and fire. And they could have stopped, delivered volleys and all this. But they get to the edge of the underbrush right here, and then all of a sudden somebody yells out, "Cease firing! Cease firing! You're firing on your own men!" And Willard, if you can imagine such a thing, dashes out in front of the line and is ordering a halt. And that's when the captains, you have to remember that it's loud. The captains would have to come out front of the companies and tell the company to cease firing. It probably took a minute or two to get everybody to quit. And then I'm not saying it's deadly silent, but compared to what it was, there's a lull on the field. You know that movie, that moment in the movie, you know, where the fog is out there and you can't see anything, and then you know what's coming, but you don't know when it's coming? I don't know who called out cease fire. Was it Confederates? Was it survivors of the 3rd Corps? I don't know. I don't know who did it. But nevertheless, as the New Yorkers are ramming new rounds home, you can hear the clang of those ramrods inside the barrel, you know, as they're reloading. All of a sudden, out of that fog comes a volley from those Mississippians. And scores of New Yorkers go down, basically along the edge of that swell. Now, the soldiers don't need to know now that there's no friendlies in their front. If there are any friendlies in their front still, well, that's too bad. Because they're opening up. And they're opening up big time. And so the New Yorkers start delivering volleys into that underbrush and those scrub trees right there, and they start advancing. One more pass at this. The lull in the fighting allowed, I don't know how many minute or two went by, the lull in the fighting allowed the Confederates, the Mississippians, to regroup. Were they in a solid battle line? No, they weren't in a solid battle line. But they were able to reload, and they were able to shake out some type of line. So anyway, when Willard starts again toward that, down in that depression, the resistance is harder from the Confederates. But nevertheless, they're driving them through sheer force of numbers back through there. And the whole time, ladies and gentlemen, those Union soldiers are chanting, "Remember Harper's Ferry. Remember Harper's Ferry." And I think they're advancing with zeal, if you can. What questions we got?
They were aware that the Confederate troops they were facing were the same ones from Harper's Ferry?
At what point they did, I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you I've never seen any instance where they were told as a group.
I got you.
But I'm sure as they passed over, I can't tell you where the furthest Confederate was on this field, but as they advanced further into the swell, the thicker the Confederates become, and I mean wounded and dead and prisoners and so forth. You know, the further you drive into that wood line, the thicker, the more you stir up the hornet's nest in there, because they're thick as, you know, fleas. Men began to fall at a rapid pace. On we rushed with loud cries, wrote a New Yorker, with bullets whizzing by our ears, with shells screaming and cannonballs tearing the air, now bursting above and around us, now plowing the ground at our feet, and laying many of our men low in death or bleeding with wounds. Captain Thompson, this would have been right here, of the 111th New York recalled, into this hell of destruction we were ordered to charge. Men fell at every step. We officers were kept busy closing the ranks as they were depleted and pushing on, not heeding the storm of metal. As they advanced in the swell, quote, a short but terrible contest ensued in the bushes in the swell, remembered Captain Richardson. But the Confederates stubbornly yielded ground. That's crazy. Any questions?
Matt,
Yes.
when does Barksdale go down in relationship to all this?
Okay, so let me teach you something about time.
Okay.
So when I prepare a talk, not in this particular instance, but when I prepare a talk, ladies and gentlemen, and you never do this because there's no reason for you to do this, I want to make sure that I have a consistent story. And so I don't want to name any names, but I'll have the big authors out there from Gettysburg, and I'll have all their books lined up, all different people talking about the same thing. And I'll have it opened up to a different page in a different book. And it's weird how slightly variable that is. For example, to the gentleman's question, when did Barksdale go down? Did Barksdale go down before the New Yorkers hit the swell, or did he go down? Did he go down before that cease-firing incident happened? I see it written both ways, and there's really no way to know, because the participant that wrote about cease-firing had no idea about Barksdale. You know, he's further down the line. But so it's hard to say exactly at what point. I would say that beyond, it is probably going to be Willard's men that felled Barksdale. I mean, I don't know who else could do it. Lucky Shell, I don't know. You could put it on a number of things. But the law of probability says that those New Yorkers, the 125th reportedly had an entire company, in one account, had an entire company of men train their rifles on the Confederate general. Now, and bring him down. I have that written down somewhere. But the New Yorkers recount that Barksdale was apparently, I put him over here by the Trossel farm, somewhere probably around that dead tree, somewhere in that area. Chuck T come out here. We missed Chuck. Chuck come out here, take you to the exact spot now. Did I forget that Coke again? No, I didn't. So anyway, when Barksdale goes down, the New Yorkers said, one New Yorker said that they could hear Barksdale cursing in the swell at his own men. Now, I'm not saying he's dog cussing them, but he's cursing, trying to get them back in line, which, you know, I mean, he's under a lot of stress. And that's where he's failed. Now, does that make the Mississippians go to pieces? I don't know. He's already been wounded. Apparently he had his left left or right foot was dangling from the stirrup. He had had his ankle or leg broken by a shot. And the shot that got him by those New Yorkers went through his lung. I think it was his left lung and his right foot. And he may have been shot somewhere else. But anyway, every time when Barksdale would breathe, when they recovered him from the battlefield, blood would come out of his lungs, you know, or his lung right there. So I'm not a medical person, but it doesn't appear good to me. Beyond a doubt. I think you need some corks right there. And I saw this account too. I didn't come out here to talk about Barksdale, but and I didn't put it in here, but I did read among Willard's men, it was some of the New Yorkers that got him after the battle, the stretcher bearers, that Barksdale was, this New Yorker, without any details, said that Barksdale was intermittently calling for help and basically cursing the Yankees, which I could totally believe. You know, what a fire eater he was. But big man too. So he goes down.
Did he have his wig on?
No, he didn't have his wig on. I do think somebody pointed out to me that one Mississippian said he had a red fez on, whatever that means. That could be a handkerchief or, you know, literally a red fez. Another Mississippian, the one that's usually quoted, maybe he lost his hat. Maybe both writers are correct. The one Mississippian wrote that when Barksdale rode the line that his hair was streaming behind him, which I think, neither here nor there, but I think it was because of his comb over, you know. And once you start galloping on a horse, you know, your hair flies off, and so I imagine that was the hair that was flying, you know. You ever done that? I've been thinking about parting mine a different way, but we don't have the parting problem. Maybe I should grow it out, you know. Just maybe y'all wouldn't notice, would you? No,
Only on a windy day.
Only on a windy day. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so they're pushing through this swell. Let's walk them down a little bit further. Just to give you a brief. This lineman told me one time. He goes, you know, I think he was in a NFL backup. Big guy on the airplane. He told me one time, sitting next to him, I was over here. There was a 3-seater, but there's only 2 of us in there, and 1.5. He told me that, you know, and I liken it to combat. He says, you know, if you play a full 60 minutes of football, you get your licks in and they get their licks in. And I think combat units look at it that way. Veteran combat units in. They never, you know, an athlete that is successful over a long period of time probably doesn't get too high and probably doesn't get too low. I can't explain it, but you know what I'm talking about. You know, Joe Montana, Derek Jeter, I mean, name somebody. You know?
Tom Brady.
Who?
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady? Yeah. I bet he got excited when he had to pay that alimony. Yeah. Nothing like looking at your ex with a, well, your ex with a, whatever that guy's name was. So, going back to Harper's Ferry, I don't know. I doubt it stood out to them. I mean, they pretty much mauled them. They don't keep a running tab on that. What else we got?
What's the timing in relation to the first Minnesota stepping
off? Let's cover that when we get down to the first Minnesota, because we're walking down to our next stop is that grassy knoll, and then we're going to follow that fence line down, and basically we're going to be doing the first Minnesota, but I got to stay on the trail.
Just need a beaver suit. Put a beaver suit on, you go anywhere.
But not kayaking. Only in the beaver suit.
Yeah, Matt, the Alabamians at the 111th turned to face, were they from a Claus division or Anderson?
They're from Anderson. They are from, they would be the right flank of Anderson. And something you ought to be aware of, and going back to why I said they went this way and they went this way. If you look at where they start from on Confederate Avenue, I'm talking about the Alabamians, they're not connected with Barksdale in my mind. They're not starting. There's several hundred yards between them. So I think they're converging from two different directions. And obviously this was never planned. You can never plan that. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what's going to happen. So they're doing all this on the fly. And they're just like Pickett's charge or any other assault, they're trying their best on the fly without any practice to get a solid line of men coming across here. Now, was it perfect? No, it was never perfect, but that's what they're attempting to do here. So you have large concentrations of men. What else we got? All right, this is from the 126. This would have been happening right in front of you, several hundred yards out there. Color Sergeant Erasmus Bassett. Who names their kid Erasmus?
Somebody
that
hates
from,
their kids.
Anyway, what's Erasmus from? What's that
Rotterdam.
I know Desiderius.
What is it from?
Erasmus from Rotterdam.
Rotterdam.
Yep.
Renaissance.
Yep.
Enlightenment.
Renaissance.
Yep.
Erasmus, that was that dude. He in the Old Testament or
He
something?
was a friend of Luther's
Oh, was it?
early on.
Okay.
They had a falling out.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, was he trying to kill Luther too?
I think Luther tried to kill him, I think.
Oh, okay. Luther was trying to kill him. So he must have really hated
Oh,
Luther.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Lucky for that prince.
Yeah.
They'd have gone medieval on him. No, oh, thank you. The dog did too, ma'am. All right. Lieutenant Color Sergeant Erasmus Bassett led the advance, waving the national colors over his head. A bullet soon struck him in his leg, but he went on. The next round hit him square in the heart, right here. And he, quote, he died without a groan. That had to happen right in front of you. Lieutenant R.A. Bassett of the 126th, also New York, recalled, when we started the charge, I occasionally glanced my eye toward the colors. And I noticed, remember, the color company will be different from whatever company he was commanding. When we started the charge, I occasionally glanced my eye toward the colors and noticed that they were kept about a rod in front of the line of battle. But while we were crossing the ravine, I noticed they faltered and finally fell. I knew then that my dear brother had fallen. You can see that flag going on. Yeah. Now he didn't know what happened to him. Lieutenant Bassett goes on to say that his best friend from childhood was also wounded in this attack, and that his friend from childhood was calling out to him to help him. And Bassett turned to him and says, you know, I can't help you. I have to go on because they were under strict orders. You know, that's the human side of this stuff that we don't see. I mean, they're not robots. He had to turn his back on his friend, and he had to command a company not knowing what had happened to his brother. All he knew is the flag had gone down. Now, getting ahead of the story, later on in the evening back at the Bryan Forum, Lieutenant Bassett had the sad facts confirmed to him by his comrades that evening, that his brother had fallen. How long this tour would be without buses. So he asked permission to leave his unit. The lieutenant did, and you're looking on the same ground. That lieutenant walked the very ground that we're on, and he probably walked diagonal past those dead trees, those hardwood trees right here, and he walked out in that swell. And if you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, in the darkness, he said, Lieutenant Bassett said he had a problem because he was up against a window because the burial parties were already out there planting bodies. That's my words, not his. But they were already digging holes out there. And so he didn't know if his brother where his brother was, if he was alive. So if you can imagine this in the darkness, and it would have been dark by now. He is going up to Union soldiers, dead Union soldiers, and he is rolling them over in the darkness. Many of them he knew. He was finding his own comrades, people he didn't come looking for. He was finding them dead out here in the middle of the field. And eventually, he does come across his brother. The lieutenant dutifully retrieved the personal effects, and I guess he dug the grave or got somebody to come over there, and he marked the grave, and he wrote his parents telling them where they could find his brother's, their son's grave if they wanted to come claim the body. Among the personal effects that Bassett took off of him, he took the color sergeant's diary. And inside the diary, which is still extant today, he wrote in it, Lieutenant Bassett wrote in it, he said, 12 o'clock at night, I find my brother Erasmus lying dead, where I took this from his pocket. And he sends that diary on back to the family. Now his brother's dead, and the family, there was 3 brothers, and the family had already lost another son at Antietam. Whatever that is, 8 months before, something like that, 9 months before. So that's 2 out of 3. You know, you get into the Sullivan brothers from World War II, etc. That's why we stopped this stuff. It's putting everybody together. You know, so hopefully this stuff doesn't happen as frequently as it did. Not to get into Saving Private Ryan. But yeah, you would have had dozens of dead New Yorkers among the Confederates right there. Now, I'm about to talk about something that I'm not really that sure about, but I think I've got enough, what do you call the evidence on the periphery? Peripheral evidence?
Substantial.
Substantial? Circumstantial. Yes, circumstantial. I like them Latin words, especially with the judge. Nolo contendere. You must be a lawyer, you laugh at that. I had a guy, a visitor, come up to me randomly, and I started foaming at the mouth when he started telling me that back in Mississippi he had his ancestors' letters from Barksdale's brigade. Okay, and I'm like, I like you. All right, you're my friend. And I started to, and he was telling me that some relative took them and they couldn't find the originals, but they thought copies were over here. All this turned out, I'm saying all this to say that I have not seen the originals. He never did send them. But he did make the remark to me, which I thought very telling. And for a visitor that's not into Gettysburg, it's hard to make something up that you didn't read, right? Okay? So this guy didn't strike me as somebody he struck me as somebody that was telling the truth. He said that the letter about Gettysburg, his ancestor noted that when the Yankees charged across this field, they were bayoneting the wounded as they were coming across. Now that may be true or that may not be true. I mean, what do you call an example? Was it wholesale? Do you count it if one person did it? I mean, you know, how widespread was it? The only reason I'm telling you this, otherwise I wouldn't mention it, is because on the Yankee side, on the Willard side of the equation, there's a brief, soldiers don't talk about this, but there's a brief excerpt from the soldier that says some of Barksdale's men, after they passed over them into the swell, picked up their guns and were shooting into our backs. You know, they surrendered or they played possum. I don't know what happened out there. But when they passed over them, that is like, that I would equate to the unwritten rules of baseball. You know, you don't, with 15 runs up, you don't leg out a triple. You know, that's the unwritten rules of baseball, you know. That's the unwritten rules of combat. You don't, after you surrendered, you do not pick that gun back up. That's a no-no. Now, did that happen? I don't know. But some people got killed. He talks about that problem being eliminated by whoever did that right there. What I'm talking about, again, to reiterate, is what did that New Yorker say earlier? They went at it with fury. And I've joked around a lot today, as I usually do, but one thing I can't capture for y'all is the incentive of these New Yorkers. I can't capture the adrenaline for y'all of this New Yorkers, and I can't capture the anger that goes into combat for y'all. I mean, it had to be a rage in there, and I think that's true of most combat that is successful. You know, we want to make it so non-personal. Well, you know, it's easier to kill somebody if you dislike them. At least to me, in my theory, you know, I don't, you know, like that. So, yeah, something happened out of here. I've often been curious about that. Any questions? All right, so I want you to take a look at this terrain, because we're now at the there's Charlie Fennell right there. I knew I got the hat on, Charlie. Charlie was walking out the door yesterday, and I said to him, I said, Charlie, go make us a dime today. And he goes, I can't find my hat. And I said, well, Charlie, it's on the back of your head. You know, he had the strap on, he done forgot it on the back. He was so happy about the whole thing right there. I love Charlie. Charlie's one of my favorite license guys. If you ever get a chance, take a tour with Charlie. He's great. So what we're going to do, I want you to take a look out here at the terrain, because I'm going to take you over here. We're going to make one more stop out here, and then we're going to make our way down to the weeds. But we're going to be on the outside of Willard's lines as we get down through there. This is the right flank of Willard's brigade. Somewhere in here is going to be the 111th New York. All right, I can't say that this where the exact spot is, but somewhere in here, the 111th is going across this field. Any questions? All right. We're not going to stay here that long. What I wanted to point out to y'all, though, is, you know, obviously the 1st Minnesota is here. I should say the monument is here. Now, some of y'all that have been with us a while out here on these walks can remember a park ranger named Eric Campbell. All right, now anything that Eric told me, I believe, you know, because he was a thorough researcher, and talking like he's gone, but he was a thorough researcher. And you know, I think highly of his writing. Eric says, to put it in the context, that the 1st Minnesota was down there in that dip where you see the cars going down and coming up. Eric says that the 1st Minnesota didn't charge like this. Eric says the 1st Minnesota charged, and I'm about to walk you down through there, but they basically charged down through this at right angles. In other words, they weren't charging straight ahead, they were charging like this. And if you look at the casualties of the 1st Minnesota, you'll find that their left flank, let me get this right, no, their right flank takes significant more casualties than the left flank. Why is that? Because, you know, or if I got, yeah, because they're closer to the enemy when they come out through here. Now let's go back. Whoever the gentleman was that was asking me about the 1st Minnesota, I see it written both ways. Some historians have the 1st Minnesota going in before Willard. I in particular have the 1st Minnesota going in after Willard. I think that Hancock, and there may have been something in between, but I think Hancock leaves Willard and is riding past here. If he goes past him and comes back, I couldn't say. But I think he rides back to here, and that's where he finds the colonel and tells him, whatever, you know, my God, are these the only men here? Or similar quote, and that's when he sends them forward. And it makes sense now, I hope. So you got the 111th hitting Wilcox on one side, and then you got the 1st Minnesota hitting them on the other side. So So Hancock's just throwing in anybody that he can. Willard, Minnesota, who was that, Colville? Is that his name? Colonel Colville, forget his first name. But yeah, so I think the monument's off. I'm telling you. Any questions? All right, let's not walk on the original earthworks. Let's get back on the road. We're going to go back down to where that snake rail fence is, and we should be able to pick up the trail that'll take us out to the swell somewhere in there. You don't see it.
It's over that way. There's the monument right there.
Oh, it's over here. Oh, okay, yeah. Stuff Rider knows his stuff now. Look at that.
I'm making a show anyway.
He actually spoke, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all catch that? You'll have to rewind your film. Stuff Rider spoke. They're all very interested in you.
Yeah.
They want to know if you're coming, and I'm like... I don't know. Stuff Rider's kind of like Harrison the Scout, you know, he just shows up. This is gold. My God.
You could auction off the Elvis pants in the swamp.
Oh yeah, yeah. Look at him. I tell you, the guy's hating is the guy on the tail, man. Them shorts, they're smart though, letting them beat the grass down in front of them, you know.
From previous work, you used to tell them to wait for the people with long pants to go first.
Yeah.
You know,
We don't ever come out much anymore, you know.
yeah.
So,
Okay, Father Corby, you get a second
Yeah.
chance.
Father Corby.
Plenty of other rocks around here, you know.
Yeah. No, we think it's one of those boulders by the maintenance yard. But I couldn't tell you which one.
So how did he get there? I guess I gotta be able to see him from the road.
Yeah.
That's true.
And they probably, I'm just guessing,
Yeah.
they probably wanted, they probably didn't want to put New York by Pennsylvania. They didn't want Corby dwarfed by the statue. You know, because it's hard. You can have a nice statue, but then there's this. I mean, you know,
It's true.
you don't bring a,
Because I've been known to.
you know, it's like bringing a butter knife to a gunfight. You know, it's just like some things aren't going to work out probably. All being said.
Oh, yeah.
Now I've got a free dinner, taco dinner coming to me if I do this, okay? The guy bet me that I would not do this, free dinner, so you got to do something for me.
That could be dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous.
Who's making the tacos?
The real deal. No, but don't go in there and talk to him. He's the server, he's the chef, he's the owner, he's a one-man show. Real deal. You come on, ma'am, you gonna make it.
Getting back, that's the hard part.
John Wayne Buck can make it, you can make it.
I did.
Mm-hmm. What are you doing, boy? It's good to see you.
Hey Matt, was this just all pasture land?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's all pasture land, and there's actually a spring out here somewhere. I think it's on the other side. Isn't it? There's a group of veterans.
Walk through it.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a pretty good indication right there, you know. So, I want you to capture this up on film because I don't want to do it. All right, so, reportedly one time, James Brown, James Brown was accidentally given orange sunshine, LSD. And he went out on stage and he did many mysterious things for the crowd. One of the things was, while the band kept playing, James Brown proceeded to introduce a new dance move called the moon. Now, we will all practice the James Brown Orange Sunshine moon. If you will place your hands over your head like this, right here, capture the crowd for everybody. Right there, ladies and gentlemen. James Brown stood in front of the group for 15 minutes, saying nothing, but giving them the moon. I just got free tacos. That's a good story. Hit me! Hit me, I said. So, look at where we came from. Look at 1st Minnesota Monument. Look at to your, I guess your left where I'm pointing. That's where I say, or Eric said, that the 1st Minnesota came from. Notice how the depression in the ground, you got to get out on the field, ladies and gentlemen, in order to understand what's happening. Now look at this swell. Now look at the depression and how it feeds into here. I think if I was a commander and I wanted to get my men in shelter as best I could, I'd be in there. I wouldn't be up here. I'd be down there. You want to get them as low as possible, at least in my mind. So anyway, 1st Minnesota's coming this way. Now look at the Willard's Brigade's advance. Look at where the lift is out in the distance. Look at where the New York Auxiliary Monument is, which we stopped at out there. There's where Willard is going to be advancing across the field. If you were standing on this rock, which I would suggest you not do, in 1863, you would have had perfect. You would have had the 1st Minnesota coming right towards you, and you would have had those New Yorkers coming across your front. This would be where I set my lawn chair up, right here, right? And so they're going into the swell. Now the reason I put Willard further down and I put the 1st Minnesota further up is the stone that we're about to see, which is going to mark the site of Willard in just a second. Now, the other reason I pulled you over here is because you can't see through that underbrush. Where you see the horses up ahead, I'm not saying they made it that far, but Willard's Brigade is going to keep advancing. Remember, in combat, you always want to keep going. Veteran troops always keep it going. You never stop. What does the military preach today? You do not halt. During an assault, you keep going. No matter what happens, you will push forward. All right? Well, you can't see but the over there. So Willard's men pushes through this swell, which would not have been as thickly underbrush, and they start climbing out the other end of the line, pursuing the Confederates. There's no telling how many they shot in the back. But now Barksdale's men are retreating in full mode. Now, as they cross the swell and they start to get on that rise, apparently there was a battery, an abandoned battery of Union artillery. There was an abandoned battery, at least a caisson or a tube or something out there in the middle of the field. And about everybody in Willard's Brigade claimed to have recaptured those guns right there. But apparently they come back, and on that somewhere on that rise up there, they do liberate, I guess for lack of a better word, Union cannons that had been abandoned on the retreat back here. That's a big deal, even if you're recapturing your own men. As the line emerged, Confederate artillery from the Peach Orchard to the Klingel House. You might see the Klingel. Is there a White House over there? Okay. So Confederate artillery from that White House, you can't see the Peach Orchard. You may have to go to your right in order to see the Klingel. Confederate artillery starts unlimbering from that high ground, and the shells start coming in. Well, what are you supposed to do? You're out the other side. You're already on the enemy side of the thing, and you have no direct orders. Now you've driven a hole, you've driven the Confederates back, and you don't know what to do. All right. When they advanced into the field, the brigade also started receiving fire from the right flank. your right flank as they advance. Who is shooting at them from the right? Wilcox. That's why I put the 1st Minnesota second to Willard. That's also another clue for me. If you're receiving fire from your right flank, then surely the 1st Minnesota has not charged yet, or is in the act of charging, whatever, however it's working out. How does Leno write it? Is he with me or against?
Pretty much so.
Okay, so don't mention if he's not. It's the God's truth, Matt. I tell you what, it's just like you read it. Right there. So anyway, that puts me having Wilcox already here, probably along that fence line over here, and that's probably going to be part of the reason Wilcox starts to withdraw, is because Willard goes past him. And when he pushes out in the middle of the field, then Wilcox is being threatened from the Confederate right rear, and you got the 1st Minnesota hitting you from the front. Who Wilcox later wrote he thought a brigade attacked him, not a regiment. So those Minnesotans must have really been on top of it, you know, when they went out through here. But anyway, all that's taking place right through here. The Union holds that high ground right beyond the swell. Wilcox is Alabamian somewhere in here, and the 1st Minnesota coming directly, you know, from behind you into this area. So the attack, best way I can explain it is Barksdale comes in first, then Wilcox, then Lang, then Wright. Wright's gonna punch in all the way up at the copse of trees, somewhere around there. The best way I can explain it, ladies and gentlemen, is the first in to combat along this line is the first out. So if Barksdale gets here first, Barksdale's the first to leave. Wilcox gets here second, Wilcox is the second to leave. And it's so the line just starts unraveling. It came in line from right to left, and it unraveled right to left. It's Willard, and then Minnesota, and then, you know, 1st Corps, all of them start pushing forward from here. Make sense? Yes. Right. Okay, so put yourself in the position. Where you see those guns up ahead, and a little bit to the left on the higher ground where we can't see, Confederate artillery is starting to fire. If I'm Willard's line, and the peach orchard's over here, and I'm receiving fire, and my line is discombobulated and everything else, then what am I going to do? What are my choices here? Put yourself in the shoes of Willard. Is he supposed to retake the peach orchard with one brigade? I mean, what does he see in front of him? Well, where is he supposed to go? Is he supposed to go here? Back to the original spot where he jumped off for the attack? Is he supposed to withdraw to here? Or is he supposed to return to there, where he started the whole attack? What I'm trying to put in your mind is, he doesn't know what to do. He just assumed brigade command, what, 5 days ago, 7 days ago? Something like that. This guy's a novice at what he's doing, and he don't want to mess up. So anyway, they get to the other side on that swell, and if you can, this is probably from his greenness too, or maybe he just really wanted to. Willard stops the brigade and has them shake out their, I don't know what you call it. I would call them like company guides. What do you call guide-ons? Guide-ons. He brings out the guide-ons, where basically we don't see this a lot because most of the time you never have a whole regiment. But each company would have these little bitty flags at the end of it to keep them in line. And you put them on a bayonet or something. You know, so you need a flagpole or something. Sometimes you make them bigger. But either way, you put them on the either end of the regiment and you align on those flags. That's how you keep everything straight. Point being, in the middle of all this Confederate cannon fire, and they're probably shooting canister in some cases, Willard stops the brigade, gets the guide-ons out, and has the brigade dress their ranks. Then, right in front of you, this would have happened right in front of you, Willard has them about face, turn their back to those Confederate cannons, and march back down that slope into this swell. And out into the, into here. Now, this is where the New Yorkers are. He puts them in a depression, but they're still getting shelled. Now, I'm going back to what I just told you a minute ago. What is the mindset of Willard? What is he supposed to be doing? He doesn't know what to do. One author said that the New Yorkers were here 15 minutes. I don't know what he based that on, but they're standing in that swell for 15 minutes. If it lasted that long, can you imagine being in charge and watching your men die as a result of you holding them in place right here? So what does Willard do? His brigade is faced like this. He has them turn to the right, and he withdraws them. He begins to withdraw them. Now we're going to take a few steps over here. I guess we need to go around the edge of the fence, don't we? Who was the last person out here? Or you go straight ahead? No, I think we had to go around the fence though, right, to get to it, or we go through that gap. Okay, we're going to walk out here, and I'm going to show you a monument, if that's what you call it, a marker that most people never see on their travels.
Casualties.
Yeah. And they said a battle walk. I thought we were doing the whole. We come out here and he took us in the weeds. And his jokes weren't that funny either.
Well, so. Some good, some bad.
Whew.
Take
that seat.
Thank God it's human.
Yeah. Well, it didn't rain.
Yeah, that's good.
No, not at all.
Man, you could have planned to let it a little better than we had that miles of path.
Well, I was told yesterday there was a path. What do I know? There is now. So we are supposed, you can see where they mowed. We are supposed to be, well, trying the best we can. All this rain is hard to keep up. We're trying to keep a path to all the monuments. I mean, that grow up, you know. But, you know, we could. How many people coming out here? So how big a priority? How many people gonna walk? Would you have walked out here if I hadn't made you?
Probably not once.
I'm definitely taking offense. Yeah. Especially
we
ones I
would.
don't like.
We would, but you know.
Probably been here several times.
That's right.
I don't even want to know half what y'all doing.
No, you don't.
Come on up, ma'am. You can elbow yourself. You hadn't seen this. Bring that boy, too. Everybody up. CJ up. That means he's usually the last.
No, I've never met him before.
All right, let me read an attack. Let me read an account of the attack across this area, and then we'll get to this monument. This is from a soldier from the 111th New York, which had to be in this general vicinity. He said afterwards, he said, "We officers were kept busy closing the ranks as they were depleted and pushing on." Think about that. Not heeding the storm of metal. Our brigade was a large one, and despite its losses, presented a long line of bright bayonets. As we neared the rebel lines, their fire slackened and they began to give back. I have never seen soldiers who would stand and receive a bayonet charge. Their wavering inspirited our men, and we had just got in reach of a Massachusetts battery of the 3rd Corps, that might be Turnbull, which they had left and which the enemy had turned and were using on our lines. When we discovered that we were losing our men rapidly, somebody asked me about this earlier, from the fire of the Union guns in our rear. So we were ordered to retreat. Now this he's writing this at old age. So as we came back, we brought in as prisoners the line of the enemy that we would run over in our forward movement. Okay. As the New Yorkers are retreating across the swell, Willard is apparently trying to rally them. And on this spot, ladies and gentlemen, at least according to the veterans, and this would have been open, and a lot of men would have been able to see this,
A Confederate cannonball is going to come from the peach orchard, and Willard is mounted on horseback. And let me get the quote right. When the shell hit, quote, it carried away part of his face and head, and Willard, quote, fell from his horse instantly dead. A newspaper account stated that Willard, quote, was struck by a shell which tore the angle of his mouth. So it probably went, you know, at the angle of the mouth. It probably was right here. All this below the jaw and into the shoulder. If you can imagine that just being removed. It was struck by a shell which tore the angle of his mouth and shattered his chin and his shoulder. You can imagine that doing to a body. The mangled corpse horrified those close to the scene. Because you know when that shell struck home, I mean, there was geysers of blood going everywhere. I mean, it sprayed. It had to spray some of the soldiers if he's up by the line, you know. Not to mention, a lot of men saw it and very few wrote about it. What happened. But that happened, ladies and gentlemen, right here. Right here. As they're returning them across the swell. Isn't that cool? If y'all go back home tonight and you look up the old photos, you can see right where you're standing, and you would have been where the photographer is, you can see a group of old veterans from the 125th around this monument. Right out here. And you'll notice there's no trees around. When it's wide open when they're dedicating this monument. Sitting on the ground. So that's pretty cool that we have that marked. They subsequently, ladies and gentlemen, and one of the oddest stories of the Civil War, in my opinion, they took Willard back to New York, being a higher ranking officer, and I don't know why, but the family insisted on an open casket. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, now we're getting to the nitty gritty.
Different strokes for different folks.
And they strategically placed an American flag over the hole. So when you walk by the glass coffin, you look down, you would seen an American, I don't know how big it was, but an American flag kind of rolled up right here. Now, the odd thing about it is, I asked a guy one time, I won't mention any names, with LBG, former embalmer. And you always want to talk to the embalmer. Always nice to the embalmer, the postman, and the butcher. Okay, so you never know when you need any three of them. And the undertaker's always good, you know. But anyway, he told me that, well, not to go into detail, but basically embalming is done through these two jugular veins, right, that run down through here. When you don't have that capacity, you can use a topical solution. Now, I don't even know if they did that, but best you can, you would rub embalming fluid, whatever that was at the time. It was in its nascent state. So whatever that is, you rub it on, and it preserves it for best it can. You know, if you're thinking that you want to be an Egyptian, I hate to tell you, but they removed anything that would decompose. If you want to go that route, you know, and we didn't do that in the 19th century, except for the Confederates apparently. That was horrible. So when they got inside the viewing to the wake, whatever they had done had not worked, and so there was a, how would you say it? There was a permeable, palpable, permeable, noticeable. Give me another one.
Unbearable.
One newspaper reporter, you always got to take it. You got to read multiple accounts and try to put the pieces together, because some people are a little bit softer on the details than others. But one newspaper reporter said something like that much confusion ensued around the coffin as the viewing line was coming through, something like that. So in other words, I think people were going up to the coffin and recoiling.
How long after was this? Did they get him? I mean,
Would you
must
say?
have been.
I want to say the 7th, maybe, something like that. So about 5 days. I had to look it up, but they got him in the ground quick. But you could smell him as going through there. And other reports say that people rushed from the house.
Wow.
Now, but well, you think so, Bob? Yeah. Bob agreed. Put you on the dining room table, Bob. I'm gonna be laughing. So anyway, that's the end of Willard. Now, one last thing, we'll get into casualties and we'll get out of here and go get some air, maybe go get some French fries. But
after that story,
my friend, my old colleague Bert, one time was leading I won't get it right. He was leading a school group across Pickett's Charge, and he got to the Emmitsburg Road, and he got a complaint because he described to the school kids Union canister fire as being small pieces of pepperoni flying through the air, which was apparently not well received by the group at the time. But nevertheless, in Bert's defense, quite accurate. You know, it was going across through there. So anyway, who's the next guy in charge? The next senior colonel is Eliakim Sherrill. And Sherrill takes command, and you think Willard was inexperienced. Sherrill doesn't have anything. And he just saw his colleague ripped apart by a Confederate cannonball. So you can imagine his mindset. So let's go back to what I said earlier. Here's where they started from, over here. Here's where they've ended up. And Sherrill's sitting here and they're taking casualties, and what do? He has no orders. So Sherrill does the best thing he knows. His boss, Alexander Hayes, is 3/4 of a mile in that direction. That's who needs to tell him what to do, but he's not here physically. So Sherrill makes a decision. The Union soldiers have crossed into somewhere in here, and they're standing at attention. He has those soldiers faced by the right flank, and he marches and starts marching them back to the very beginning of this tour, to where I showed you at the Bryan farm. Now somewhere in here, within a few yards, maybe at this spot exactly, but somewhere within a few yards, take away the trees again, etc. That's nice cover.
Yeah.
Up rides a Union general, and he is literally doing everything but frothing at the mouth. His name is W.S. Hancock.
Jeez.
And if you don't know his name, you're about to know his name. Let me give you a quote. Hancock comes riding up, and riding to the head of the brigade, he asked Colonel McDougal of the 126th New York, remember there, with the first colonel he found, who had given this command to withdraw. Hancock would go ballistic. I mean, you could power a nuclear station if you could hook up to his blood pressure right there. Thank you, whoever laughed. It's getting late. So, anyway, McDougal would later write that at the same time, Hancock demanded, quote, demanded to know, quote, with parentheses, with a stream of profanity, which Captain Thompson of the brigade expected, quote, from a drunken sailor, but not from a gentleman, end of quote. Hancock demands who is in command, and after being informed it was Sherrill, Hancock immediately on this field at this location, this general location, said to Sherrill, you're under arrest. Now, after everything that had gone on with Harper's Ferry, you got the 126th right here, you got the one, you know, that's trying to regain, you got the 125th, etc. After everything that they've been through, Sherrill's placed under arrest. I need not tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that's a big deal to a professional military officer. Okay, some people it doesn't bother so much, you know, if it happens enough. But basically, when you're placed under arrest, you're saying that you have no confidence. The commanding officer is saying it's like being relieved of your post. I mean, that's a bad thing to do. All the military people shaking their head, oh yeah, man. All the Navy guys, you don't miss movement, I tell you that. So Sherrill is, I don't know if he rode to the back of the column, but that's generally where they did. But they marched back up to the Bryan farm. Now that night, when everything is calmed down, some of the brigade officers go to Alexander Hayes, the division commander, Corps Division Brigade. Some of the brigade officers go to Hayes, and they say, look, Sherrill was he didn't know what to do. There was no orders, etc. He's been placed under arrest. He's really upset about it. Hayes says, all right. So Hayes goes over to Hancock's headquarters, and he explains. Now, by this time, Hancock is calmed down. All right? But he explains to Hancock, Hayes does, the situation. And Hancock lets Sherrill out of arrest because they've got another day of combat coming. Otherwise, I don't know what Hancock would have done, but he lets him out. Now, subsequently, Pickett's charge happens on July 3rd. This is not the focus of the walk today. It's a whole nother walk probably within itself. But needless to say, when Sherrill was placed in command on July 3rd, his soldiers said that he was recklessly exposing himself. I think on horseback. But the inevitable happened. A Confederate bullet is going to shoot him in the stomach. And I can't think of probably a worse death than peritonitis. You know, it's just whatever that is. But Sherrill suffered a horrible death as a result. It wasn't quick. And but he redeemed himself. I mean, that meant that much to him to get back. Now, a few months later, as everybody knows, this Gettysburg buff, Hancock is wounded during Gettysburg, and it takes several months for him to recuperate. By the time Hancock gets back to the Army, I think this is in '64, they're starting to really get the campaign, getting ready for Lee versus Grant, etc., which is really going to get bloody. Hancock is sitting around with his staff officers, and he says to his staff officers, I forget who, he says, you know, I guess it's time I apologize to that colonel about Gettysburg. And the officer turns to Hancock and he says, damn you, Hancock, it's like every other apology from you. It's too late. Because Sherrill was already dead from there.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
If he was so upset about him pulling out, why didn't he just countermand the order and come stand back?
Yeah. Yeah, he could have done that. It's never explained.
How would you explain this? As my father used to say, I think you could sum it up this way. He would say to me, I would have a bright idea, and he would say to me, Matt, I do not pay you to think. Okay? Do not think. Don't do anything. Just do what I tell you. That's what he'd tell me over and over. Don't think. Don't want you to think. Don't do anything. No, in answer to the question, no, Sherrill didn't deserve that. No, he didn't deserve that. He's doing the best that he can, but I'm not telling y'all Civil War buffs anything. There is no reasoning with W.S. Hancock in the middle of battle. That man's off he flies, man. He needs to go see over here Pennsylvania Counseling Service. About some anger management issues, whatever they're doing over there, There's no reasoning with it. I mean, it is what it is. I'll tell you one other thing about Hancock to give you a measure of the man. That man goes, Hancock as an old man stands in front of the survivors of the 1st Minnesota, in front of them, and tells them to their face that if he had it all over to do again, he'd reissue the order. Told them. Now, what kind of gumption you got on that now? I mean, you get 82% casualty, you got this dog standing in front of you saying, I did the right thing. He never If Hancock was here, I don't know what kind of mood he'd be in. But, you know, if it's July 2nd, we're not talking to him. If we're talking to him post-war, yeah, maybe he'd talk about it. I'm sure he regretted it. But a lot of people die in the war, people. A lot of men die. So this is something we're focusing on today, but Hancock commands the Corps. And if he had to worry about every soldier that got killed in the Second Corps, he'd never get anything done, you know. And so that's just war. You have to deal with it. You have to put it behind you. How you do that, I could not tell you. You have to ask a combat veteran. But you got to put it in your back of the mind. I've heard B-17, you know, flight crews say, you know, you never say it, but you're always hoping it's the next guy. You know, whatever you're doing out there. So, you know, they go back. So the losses of the brigade as they fall back, they lost, out of 1,500 men, we'll make it even. Willard's brigade, Sherrill's brigade is going to lose 714 men, or basically 47% of their strength. And all of that losses, ladies and gentlemen, now some of that is going to come from the skirmishing at the Bliss Farm, and some of it's going to come from Pickett's charge, I'm sure. But for a total of 2 days of combat, they suffered 47%. And I assure you that the majority of the casualties probably came from this attack. So, you know, just be a guesstimate from here, what they lost here. But I would say they at least lost probably a third. That'd be about right, 20 to 30% unit casualties right here. So to break it down, in conclusion, the 39th New York, 269 men, they lose, they're on the extreme left. Remember, they didn't go in the attack. They only lost 35%, only 35%. The 111th New York, who was on the flank, remember, who went up against Wilcox in the end of Barksdale, they lost 64%. What does that tell you about the firepower going in on the right flank of that? There's a lot of firepower, and Wilcox, I'm assuming, would have been in a lot better shape than Barksdale would have been. The 125th New York on the left, once again, look at the terrain. They suffer 36%. But really the 126, where we stopped back on the road, high ground where I put them going over the top, you know, they don't have any swells. Go back and look at it. The 126 suffers 51%. So if you took it from right to left of Willard's brigade, you would have 64%, 51, 36, and 35. The casualties are successively going lower from Union right to Union left. And all that happens in a, you know, whatever, 15 minutes, 20, something like that. I bet it looked like a lifetime. I do anyway. Ooh, somebody's gonna be getting mad at me. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I had 95 people together today, and I probably got about 50 right now. Okay, some people come out here, they don't know what a battle walk means. They don't know about them old days, dude.
It's just like Willard's Brigade.
Oh, yeah, from 2010. Who would have guessed? And you know what? Dang it, the ending was the same.
That's right.
God come up with something different right here. I put a few stories in here, and I think I have a better grasp. I've never watched myself, or rarely watched myself, so I don't know how I did in 010, but hopefully this one was better today. These men out here, the hard way to say it is everything that I told you today. These men, these Union men, are buying time with their lives. I hate to say it that you're what have I got on that, see, that's what I get for leading the group. I hate to say it, but your life is not worth anything on a battlefield. You should know that if you study military history. You just, and like Hancock told those men to their face, if they had to do it again, they were ordered. Why are generals successful? I hate to say it, because they are willing to order the very thing that they loved to their death. That's what the difference is between a successful general and a non-successful, most of the time, is their willingness to get dirty, so to speak, right there. Anyway, it's quite a story. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.